Hello everyone. I am the Macabre. I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Where are you from and what time are you watching now? Sit back and relax. Asterisk, The Garden of Shadows. Chronicles of a Broken Mirror, Chapter, The First Reflection. The frost clung to Dr. Lucas Hale's trench coat as he approached the derelict greenhouse, its shattered glass panes glinting like jagged teeth under the pale morning light. He hadn't set foot in an autopsy room in 3 years, not since the incident with the Redfield case, but the Stonesgate PD had begged him to come out of retirement. 7 bodies in a month, the chief had said over the phone. And this one's different. Lucas tightened his gloves, his breath crystallizing in the air. Different, indeed. The stench hit him first, rot-laced with the cloying sweetness of black chrysanthemums. Inside, the greenhouse was a cathedral of decay. Vines choked rusted trellises, and petals the color of dried blood littered the floor. In the center lay the body of a man in his 40s, splayed on a stone slab. His chest cavity had been hollowed out, ribs curled outward like the legs of a dead spider. Detective Maria Reyes, her face a mask of forced stoicism, gestured to the wound. "No blood," she said. "The heart's gone. But look here." Lucas leaned closer. Nestled where the heart should have been was a rectangular object wrapped in burlap. His scalpel trembled faintly, an old tremor he'd thought long buried as he cut the twine. The cloth fell away, revealing a fractured mirror smeared with a substance too dark to be rust. His own reflection stared back, gaunt and haunted, until the fog of his breath obscured it. Then, beneath the condensation, another face materialized, a child, grinning. "Christ," Reyes muttered, crossing herself. The boy in the mirror couldn't have been older than 8, his features frozen in a joy that bordered on mania. Lucas traced the glass's edges surgical precision, no shards. Someone had embedded it into the sternum with the care of a jeweler setting a diamond. "Who is he?" Reyes asked. Lucas didn't answer. His eyes flicked to the man's hands, fingernails torn, palms scored with crescent moon cuts. Defense wounds or self-inflicted? Outside, the forensic team buzzed like wasps, but the greenhouse felt eerily silent. Lucas slipped a UV flashlight from his kit. The beam revealed faint glyphs etched into the mirror's frame, alchemical symbols for purification and void. His throat tightened. Years ago, he'd seen similar markings in a cult suicide case. "This isn't just murder," he murmured. "It's a statement." Reyes flipped open her notebook. Victims: Carl Mercer. Pharmacist. No criminal record. Reported missing 4 days ago. Family says he'd been acting paranoid, kept saying he was being followed by his shadow. Lucas glanced at the ceiling. A rusted hook dangled above the slab, swaying gently. A noose? But no rope. Only a single black chrysanthemum, its stem knotted into a hangman's knot. As he documented the wounds, Lucas noted the paradox. Savage tearing of the abdomen, yet the mirror's placement was meticulous. 2 perpetrators? Or one with compartmentalized methods? His mind wandered to the old journals. He'd studied cases of dissociative identities manifesting as distinct killers in a single body. A chill skittered down his spine. The child in the mirror was still smiling. "Doc." Reyes pointed to the victim's left forearm. A series of numbers had been carved into the skin. Lucas froze. The Redfield case, October, the day he'd failed to stop a serial arsonist, the day his own daughter had. He shut his eyes. Coincidence? It had to be. Yet when he looked again, the numbers seemed to blur, reforming into symbols he couldn't decipher. As they prepared to transport the body, Lucas lingered. He crouched beside a cluster of black chrysanthemums, their petals velvety and cold. Beneath one bloom, partially buried in soil, lay a child's hair ribbon faded blue, streaked with mud. He slipped it into his pocket, a habit from his days as a coroner. Collect the fragments, solve the puzzle. But this puzzle felt alive, watchful. The greenhouse windows, he realized, were mirrors now, each pane reflecting that same grinning child. Back in his car, Lucas turned the key with unsteady hands. The rear-view mirror caught his eye for a heartbeat. His reflection wasn't his own. A young boy stared back, lips parted in a silent laugh. Lucas slammed the glove compartment shut. When he looked again, the boy was gone. Only the echo of his own breathing filled the silence, along with the uneasy truth. Stonesgate's nightmare was just beginning. And the mirrors, he suspected, were only the first page of a darker story. Chapter Diary of an Eclipse. The killer's lair was a basement beneath an abandoned observatory, its walls plastered with star charts and pages torn from medieval grimoires. Dr. Elena Voss, forensic psychologist and skeptic of anything resembling the supernatural, stepped over a threshold littered with dead moths. Her flashlight beam trembled slightly. "This isn't obsession," she whispered to Detective Reyes. "It's worship." The air tasted metallic, like old coins and dried blood. In the center of the room, a desk groaned beneath leather-bound journals, their spines cracked with age. Elena opened the first one. The pages were written in a hybrid of cursive and frantic scrawl, ink alternating between black and a brown so dark it could only be blood. The entry, dated October, began with a verse: "When the moon swallows the sun, the garden blooms with unlit souls." Beneath it, a series of differential equations calculations for a solar eclipse that had plunged Stonesgate into darkness 7 years prior. Reyes sifted through Polaroids nailed to the wall. Victims pre- and post-mortem, their eyes sewn shut with thread. "This guy's a poet and a mathematician?" Elena didn't answer. Her focus snagged on a diagram of a human heart, annotated with surgical notes. "Sutures must follow the golden ratio," the killer had written. "Symmetry is the language of the divine." But the margins devolved into chaos, repeated phrases like, "she watches," and "they're not real." A cold draft snaked through the room. Elena's breath hitched as she flipped to a page smeared with fingerprints. A child's drawing dominated the paper. Stick figures holding hands beneath a crescent moon. One figure was crossed out violently, red X's gouged into the paper. The caption read, "Lily shouldn't have looked into the mirrors. Now the shadow woman has her eyes." The name Lily hooked into Elena's memory, a cold case from a girl who'd vanished from her bedroom, leaving only a shattered vanity mirror. "Over here," Reyes called. She'd found a cardboard box filled with VHS tapes labeled Harvest. The detective slid one into a dusty player. Static fizzed, then resolved into grainy footage. A barn, its walls lined with what looked like mirrors. Hooded figures chanted as a child no older than 6 was led to a stone altar. Elena's stomach lurched as the camera panned to a woman in a black veil, her voice distorted. "The eclipse purifies. The garden grows. The feed cut to snow." Back at the journals, Elena pieced together the killer's fractured timeline. Entries jumped from clinical detachment, subject responded well to adrenal excision, to manic rants, "The roses are screaming again. He says I must cut deeper." One passage stopped her cold. "The shadow woman showed me the truth. The ones I love are doubles husks with stolen faces. I must seed mirrors in their hollow cores. Only then will the real ones return." Capgras syndrome, Elena realized. A delusion made monstrous. Reyes pried open a rusted cabinet. Inside were vials of mercury, scalpels, and a rosewood box containing 7 glass eyes. Each iris was painted with a different constellation. "Trophies?" she asked. Elena shook her head. "Tributes. He thinks he's harvesting something." Her finger traced an equation in the margins of a journal. Tau equals square root phi/pi. A formula for pain, or a bridge between dimensions. As they prepared to leave, Elena's phone buzzed a text from Lucas. "Autopsy confirms Mercer's missing heart was removed post-mortem. But here's the kicker. The mirror had his fingerprints. Inside the chest cavity." She frowned. How could the victim place the mirror himself? Before she could reply, her flashlight died. In the sudden dark, Something skittered across the floor. Reyes cursed, relighting her beam. The journals lay undisturbed, save for one now open to a sketch of Elena's face, circled in red. In the car, Elena replayed the tape in her mind. The barn's location nagged at her. The timber matched the old Miller farm raised in the S. She pulled up the case file on Lily Miller. Missing. November last seen. Her bedroom mirror. Parents suspected in the cult Clearwater Covenant disbanded after a mass drowning. But Lily's body was never found. Until now, perhaps. Because the man we're hunting isn't just killing, she thought. He's digging up ghosts. Back at her apartment, Elena poured whiskey, her hands steadier than her nerves. On her laptop, she zoomed into a photo of the killer's diagram. The heart, the golden ratio, the eclipse, and tucked in the corner, almost invisible, a tiny sigil, an eye inside a crescent. She'd seen it before. Dropping her glass, she yanked open a filing cabinet. There, in a cold case from the same symbol carved into a victim's rib cage. The victim's name? Ethan Voss, brother of Lily. Presumed dead. No, Elena whispered. He's alive. And he's been pruning his garden for decades. Chapter, The Mirror Syndrome. The brain scans glowed on Elena's monitor like Rorschach blots, each fold and fissure telling a story of collapse. Bilateral damage to the fusiform gyrus, she muttered, highlighting the fragmented neural pathways. Capgras delusion where the brain rejects faces as imposters was rare, but this was different. The killer's MRI, stolen from a sanitized hospital database, showed lesions shaped like star clusters, radiating from the amygdala. Elena leaned closer. The patterns mirrored the constellations painted on the glass eyes from the observatory. This isn't psychosis. It's corruption. Across the precinct's briefing room, Lucas hunched over autopsy photos. The third victim, Janice Cole, had her liver replaced by a mirror, he said, tossing a file onto the table. But here's what's new. The glass contained traces of astatine, radioactive. It doesn't occur naturally. His voice tightened. Whoever he is, he's accessing industrial or medical waste. Maybe a lab? Detective Reyes tapped her pen. Or a morgue. Elena froze. Lucas hadn't worked in years, but his old facility handled radioactive isotopes for cancer research. Later, at St. Agnes Hospital, Elena stood outside room the survivor Derek Holt had refused to speak for days. His file listed psychogenic mutism, but his eyes, when she entered, burned with unspeakable truths. Bandages swaddled his torso where the killer had carved a spiral into his ribs. He talked to her, Derek whispered, voice cracking. The shadow woman. She smelled like burnt hair. Told him I wasn't me anymore. Elena's pulse quickened. Capgras. The killer saw Derek as a replica. But why spare him? Derek's hands trembled as he sketched on a legal pad, a faceless figure in a tattered dress, her outline dissolving into smoke. Beneath it, he wrote, "She comes from the mirrors." Elena thought of Lily Miller's case, her parents' cult obsessed with cleansing souls through reflections. Did he say anything else? Derek's gaze fell to his missing pinky, severed cleanly. He called himself the gardener. Said he was pruning the rot. Then he laughed. Said the real Derek was safe in the garden. Back at the precinct, Elena cross-referenced the cult symbols with the killers. The Clearwater Covenant's emblem, a serpent swallowing its tail, matched the Ouroboros etched into the mirrors. But their doctrine described mirrors as gateways, not weapons. Unless the killer twisted their beliefs, she thought. A call interrupted her. Lucas, breathless, got a hit on the astatine, stolen 6 months ago from a research lab in Denver. The security guard's body just turned up, in Stonesgate. Chest cavity full of chrysanthemum petals. In the morgue, Elena watched Lucas dissect the guard's throat. Hyoid bones shattered. Manual strangulation, he said, gloved hands steady. But the petal stem? His tweezers lifted a thorny vine from the esophagus. This wasn't just stuffed post-mortem. It grew here. Elena recoiled. The vine pulsed faintly, black sap oozing from its tips. That's impossible. Lucas's eyes narrowed. The soil under the body's toxicology found mycotoxins linked to hallucinogenic fungi. Maybe he's drugging them. Or us. Nightmares stalked Elena's sleep. She dreamt of the barn from the VHS tape, its mirrors reflecting versions of herself, some older, some disfigured, all whispering in unison, "You're next." She woke gasping, her apartment's mirrors draped in sheets since the observatory. But as she reached for water, her phone lit up, a text from an unknown number. A photo of her office door, taken minutes earlier. Below it, a message, "While you are in us." The next victim was found in a community theater, strung up like a marionette. Her lungs had been replaced with mirrors, their surfaces clouded with breath-like condensation. On the stage, written in her blood, "The show must darken." Lucas noted the surgical cuts reminiscent of his own technique during organ transplants. "He's mocking me," he said, voice hollow. Elena spotted a prop tucked beneath the victim's arm, a porcelain doll with no eyes. Its dress matched the one from Lily Miller's case file. Reyes traced the doll to an antique shop owned by Clara Dunn, a Clearwater survivor. "We ain't talked about that curse in 20 years, Clara spat, chain-smoking in her cluttered back room. She revealed the cult's gardening rituals, children planted in sacred soil during eclipses to purify bloodlines. When Elena showed her Ethan Voss's file, Clara's face paled. That boy was a seed. Lily too. But their mama tried to flee, got her tongue cut out. Ethan saw it. He was different after. Started drawing mirrors." In her car, Elena pieced it together. Ethan and Lily Voss, children of a cult enforcer, targeted for rebellion. Lily disappears, Ethan presumed dead. But if he survived, the dates aligned. The killer's first murder matched the year Ethan would have turned. He's not just pruning souls. He's replicating what was done to his sister. She called Lucas. "We need to exhume Lily's," the line died. Through her windshield, a shadow flickered, a woman in a tattered veil, vanishing into an alley. Elena followed, her Glock cold in her hand. The alley ended at a brick wall plastered with missing child flyers. All from the past decade. All bearing the same symbol, a snake eating its tail. A sob echoed. She turned. A boy crouched in the corner, knees to his chest. "He's coming," he whispered. His eyes were pure black, pupil-less. "The gardener's mad you found the dolls. He's gonna make you a vessel." Elena reached out. Her hand passed through him like smoke, and the boy dissolved into a swarm of moths. At dawn, Elena stormed into the precinct. "Someone's gaslighting me. Sending cult ghosts to my phone." Chapter, Hollow Earth. The excavation at the old Miller farm began at dusk, floodlights casting long skeletal shadows over the unearthed graves. 6 small coffins, each lined with mirrors and filled with black soil. Dr. Lucas Hale knelt beside the smallest one, brushing dirt from a corroded nameplate. Lily Voss, but the coffin was empty, no bones, no remains. Only a tattered journal, its pages sealed with wax. Elena flipped it open, her breath catching. "Dear Diary, Ethan says the mirrors are alive. They showed me where Mama hid the bad kids." Lucas's flashlight dipped into the open grave. Something glinted below the coffin, a narrow tunnel, its walls lined with thick roots that pulsed faintly, as if breathing. "Oh God," Reyes whispered. "It's a network. These graves, they're just the entrances." Lucas clenched his jaw. He'd seen similar tunnels in the Redfield case, though the FBI had dismissed them as animal dens. But these routes were threaded with strands of human hair, knotted like nooses. Elena's phone buzzed. A new text. She crushed the device in her fist. The boy from the alley, the one who dissolved into moths, had carved the same phrase into the dirt earlier today. "They're not hallucinations," she realized. Their warnings. The team worked in silence, extracting the coffins. The fifth contained a shock. Lucas's daughter's missing locket, engraved with Emily, rust-crusted its chain. "How?" he rasped. Emily had died in the Redfield fire. But the locket held a photo he'd never seen: Emily standing beside a cracked mirror, her reflection replaced by Lily Miller's ghostly face. Behind them both loomed the Shadow Woman, her hand on Emily's shoulder. By midnight, Reyes traced the tunnel's path to a storm drain beneath Stonesgate's abandoned church. The air reeked of wet earth and rotting lilies. Inside, they found a mural, a garden of human bodies, roots sprouting from their mouths and eyes. At its center stood a figure with Ethan Voss's face, holding a mirror that reflected an eclipse. Beneath the paint, Latin text, Hic sunt umbri, hic est hortus. Here lie shadows. Here is the garden. Lucas lingered near the altar, where an ancient TV flickered with static. He pressed play on a VHS labeled Harvest 2. The footage showed Emily Hale, alive, kneeling before a mirror. She whispered, "I see her, Daddy. The Shadow Lady says you'll burn it all." Lucas vomited. The tape's date, June, 3 months after Emily's official death. Elena pulled him aside. "He's taunting you. This isn't real." But Lucas's hands shook as he replayed the tape. "The fire. I never found her body. Just bones. What if Ethan took her? What if she's down here?" His gaze drifted to the tunnel's gaping mouth. Elena gripped his arm. "Don't. That's what he wants. You go in there. You'll end up like Lily Myth and Marrow." They returned to the precinct, the coffins now laid out in evidence. A cryptolinguist decoded Lily's diary, riddles about the garden beneath the garden, where bad seeds were buried to placate the Shadow Woman. The final entry chilled them. "Mama says mirrors are lies. But the Shadow Lady is real. She's hungry. Ethan feeds her his nightmares, and she gives him the scissors to cut the rot." Reyes hacked into Ethan's medical records. At age 12, he'd been diagnosed with Alice in Wonderland syndrome, distorted perception of body and time. But a doctor's note hinted at darker truths. Patient reports echoes of traumatic memories he didn't experience, including the death of a sister he never had. Elena slammed the file shut. They brainwashed him. Lily's death broke his mind. Now he's reenacting it with others, pruning their trauma like weeds. The next victim's body was found at dawn, posed kneeling at the church altar. Her eyes replaced with mirrors, her mouth sewn into a smile. In her hands, a Polaroid of Elena asleep at her desk. The back read, "You're almost ripe." Lucas snapped. He stormed out, armed with a pickaxe and a fury that mirrored Ethan's own madness. Elena found him at the Miller Farm tunnel entrance, sweat soaking his collar. "Don't," she pleaded. Lucas shone his light into the void. "I heard her. Down there." Emily's voice. Before she could stop him, he crawled in. The roots closed behind him like a throat. 4 hours. Elena screamed his name into the tunnel. No response. Then, at dusk, Lucas emerged pale, trembling, clutching a child's shoe caked in dried blood. "She's alive," he whispered. "Emily's alive. And she's his." Behind him, the roots began to bleed. Chapter: The Fracture Veil. The storm hit as Lucas and Elena raced back to the precinct, snow clawing at the windshield like spectral hands. She studied the child's shoe in his grip, Emily's, size speckled with blood older than her presumed death. Lucas hadn't spoken since the tunnel. His silence terrified her more than the cryptic texts. "This could be a trick," Elena said. "Ethan wants you broken." Lucas stared ahead. Her voice. "She called me Daddy." Not even Redfield could fake that. At the precinct, Reyes met them with a face like stone. "You've been hacked." The evidence board now bore a new Polaroid. Lucas crawling into the tunnel, captioned, "Welcome to the garden, Dr. Hale." Worse, the coffins from the Miller farm had vanished. In their place, Bouquets of black dahlias, their stems coiled into nooses. Security footage showed nothing but static. "He's here," Lucas muttered. "Inside the walls." Elena sequestered herself in the lab, analyzing the roots from the tunnel. Under a microscope, the fibers writhed with microbial life, genetically altered fungi that released dimethyltryptamine when heated. Hallucinogens. So he's drugging us, she thought. But how? Her coffee cup. The vents. The air. She gagged, rushing to shut off the HVAC. Too late. Her vision blurred. The shadow woman stood in the corner, veiled and humming. Upstairs, Lucas confronted the evidence locker. Emily's locket was gone, replaced by a doll's eye painted with Ursa Major. He pocketed it, then froze. A whisper drifted from the vents. "Daddy, why did you let me burn?" He followed the sound to the basement, where the storm's howl morphed into children's laughter. The morgue drawers rattled. Inside the third one, a mirror engraved with, his trembling hand reached to open it. Reyes yanked him back. "Snap out of it. You're losing it, and he's winning." Lucas shoved her, wild-eyed. "You think I don't know what sanity feels like? I buried it with my daughter." Reyes drew her gun, not on Lucas but on the shadows behind him. A figure scampered down the hall, a child in a tattered nightgown. "Emily." Lucas sprinted after her, Reyes shouting into her radio for backup. Elena, stranded in the hallucinogenic haze, stumbled into the records room. Files littered the floor, each marked with a crimson thumbprint. She found a VHS labeled Redfield Correction, Truth. The tape showed Emily, alive at age, strapped to a gurney as men in Clearwater Covenant robes chanted. A mirror hovered above her, reflecting the shadow woman. "The fire cleanses the false child," a voice intoned. Emily screamed as flames engulfed the room. But the date on the tape, October. 7 years after her death. Lucas cornered Emily in the parking garage. She turned, her face a shifting mosaic of his daughter's features and Lily Miller's hollow eyes. "You left me in the dark," she hissed. Lucas faltered. "But I mourned you." Her laugh echoed like breaking glass. "You mourned Ash. I'm the seed he planted." A siren wailed. When the squad car's lights hit her, she dissolved into moths that swarmed Lucas's throat, choking him until Reyes pulled him free. Elena's psychosis broke at dawn. She awoke in her car, parked at the edge of the woods. A note stabbed into the steering wheel. "Bring him to cabin or Emily becomes fertilizer." Her GPS marked a location miles north Hallows Peak, a derelict hunting ground. She called Reyes. "It's a trap. And if Emily's really there?" Reyes countered. Static swallowed her reply. Lucas refused to wait. He arrived at Hallows Peak alone, snow burying the path. Cabin's door creaked open to a shrine, walls papered with missing child posters, a cot strewn with Emily's toys, and a floor-length mirror draped in a black veil. Behind him, a voice rasped, "You're late." Ethan Voss stepped from the shadows, scalpels glinting in his hands. His face was a collage of surgical scars, eyes mismatched, one blue, one glass. "You've met my sister, I see. Or what's left of her." Elena arrived as they grappled. Lucas swung a fire poker, but Ethan moved with feral precision, slicing Lucas's cheek. "You think you know pain?" Ethan snarled. "Pain is your daughter's bones nourishing mine. Pain is her voice in my head, every second." He gestured to the mirror. The veil lifted, revealing the shadow woman Lily Miller's corpse fused with Emile Y's reflection, skin grafted from both girls. Lucas roared, charging. The cabin erupted in chaos. Elena tackled Ethan as Lucas smashed the mirror. Glass shards rained down, each fragment replaying Emily's abduction. Ethan dragging her into the tunnels, the Covenant's rituals, the shadow woman's whispers. "She's not yours," Lucas screamed, stabbing Ethan with a broken bottle. The killer laughed, blood frothing on his lips. You'll bury us both. But the roots are hungry. As Ethan died, the cabin trembled. The floor split open, roots surging upward to drag his body into the earth. Lucas crawled toward the mirror's remains, where Emily's reflection mouthed, "I'm sorry." Then the vision fissured. The storm died. In the sudden silence, Elena pulled Lucas to his feet. "We need to burn this place." But outside, footprints circled the cabin child-sized, leading into the woods. And nearby, freshly dug soil. A grave-sized mound, chapter, Harvest of Reflection. The grave exhaled the stench of turned earth and decay as Elena's shovel struck wood. Lucas clawed at the soil, his nails bloody. "She's here, I know it," he growled. But when they pried open the small coffin, they found not Emily, but a boy's skeleton, its ribs interlaced with thorned vines, a locket around its neck containing a dried chrysanthemum. Engraved inside, Thomas Mercer. Elena's stomach dropped. Mercer was the coroner's nephew, missing for a decade. Another seed planted. Lucas stumbled back, clutching the locket. "Why show me this? Why taunt me?" His voice cracked. Elena aimed her flashlight at the surrounding woods. The child-sized footprints weaved toward a granite outcrop, half buried in snow. Wedged between the rocks was a rusted hatch, its handle smeared with fresh blood. She hesitated. "This isn't a grave. It's a door." Underground, the tunnel walls glistened with bioluminescent fungi. Lucas trailed his fingers over the pulsating growths. "They're singing," he murmured. Dimethyltryptamine breakdown. Elena noted the same hallucinogen from the roots. She tied a bandana over her nose, but the spores had already breached her lungs. Shadows flickered at the edge of her vision. The shadow woman drifted ahead, her veil brushing the ceiling. The tunnel spilled into a cavernous chamber, its domed ceiling etched with constellations. At its center stood a mirror twice Elena's height, framed by human bones. Reflections danced in its surface. Cultists in hooded robes, Lily Miller's abduction, Ethan suturing mirrors into flesh. Lucas pressed his palm to the glass. "She's watching us through it. The shadow woman. She's collecting." A VHS tape lay at the mirror's base. Final Harvest, Emily's gift. Elena inserted it into a dusty player beside makeshift shelves lined with glass eyes. Static resolved into a Clearwater elder addressing the camera. "The shadow woman demands balance, a life for a life. Tonight, we return Ethan's sister to the glass. But Our Lady hungers for more. The eclipse will crown her queen of." The feed cut to Emily's face, bruised but alive, pleading, "Daddy, find me." Lucas screamed, hurling a rock at the mirror. The glass spiderwebbed, each shard reflecting a different atrocity. Emily strapped to an altar, Lily's burial, Elena's own face circled in red. The shadow woman materialized behind them, her voice a chorus of dead girls. "You burned my garden. Now you'll feed it." Her hand skeletal, veined with black roots, gripped Lucas's shoulder. Elena fired her Glock. The bullet shattered a shard, and the shadow woman recoiled, hissing. Lucas lunged down a side tunnel, chasing Emily's phantom laughter. "Stop!" Elena shouted, but the fungi's glow intensified, warping the walls into a labyrinth of throbbing veins. She sprinted after him, the air thickening with whispers. "Prune the rot. Cut the lies." The tunnel dead-ended at a circular room. Mirrors covered every inch, each capturing a moment from the victim's final hours. In the center, a stone altar held surgical tools and a withered rosebush, its petals black, stems twisting into humanoid shapes. Elena gagged at the stench of copper and rot. Beneath the altar lay a journal labeled Covenant's End. Lucas wasn't there. Instead, the shadow woman hovered by the rosebush, her veil dissolving to reveal Lily Miller's decayed face fused with Elena's own features. "You could have been her," she crooned. "A vessel for the garden. But you resist, like Ethan." Elena raised her gun. "You're just a ghost." The shadow woman laughed, roots bursting from her mouth. Ghosts don't hunger. A crash echoed. Elena turned as Lucas dragged Emily into the room, her wrists bound with vines. She thrashed, her eyes voids reflecting the coven's sigil. Lucas's voice trembled. She's empty inside. But he said, Ethan said if I replant her, the roots will fix her. Elena aimed at his chest. Put her down. The shadow woman's roots ensnared Elena. Choose, join the harvest, or watch him bloom. Lucas pressed a scalpel to Emily's throat, tears streaming. I have to. Don't you see? It's the only way to chapter the severed thread. The scalpel trembled in Lucas's grip, Emily's hollow eyes reflecting his fractured soul. Elena thrashed against the roots, her voice raw. She's gone, Lucas. That's not your daughter. The shadow woman's laughter echoed through the chamber, the walls bleeding black sap. Lucas's hand froze. But I heard her, he whispered. Emily's lips twitched into Ethan's grin. You hear what you crave, she hissed. Elena's fingers found the jagged mirror shard in her pocket slicing through the roots. She lunged, tackling Lucas as the blade nicked Emily's throat. The cut didn't bleed. Instead, chrysanthemum petals spilled out, their edges charred. The shadow woman screamed, her form destabilizing into smoke and thorns. Kill the lie, Elena roared, thrusting the shard into Emily's chest. The girl's body collapsed into a pile of ash and glass. Lucas howled, clawing at the remnants. Above them, the chamber's ceiling cracked, roots retracting like wounded serpents. The shadow woman coalesced, her voice a guttural snarl. You stole my harvest. Now you'll become it. The floor split, dragging them deeper into the earth's rancid belly. They landed in a flooded crypt, the air thick with the stench of rust and rotting roses. On the walls, faded frescoes depicted the Clearwater Covenant's darkest rite. Priests cutting out their eyes to see through the veil, their sockets filled with mirror shards. Elena's flashlight flickered. Shadows pooled at their feet, forming words. Only the blind find truth. Lucas stumbled toward a stone sarcophagus, its lid cracked. Inside lay a skeletally thin woman in a tattered coven robe, her face eerily preserved, hands clutching a rusted box. Elena pried it open. Inside, a film reel labeled Origin, and a journal entry dated, The Shadow Woman is no spirit. She is Catherine Voss, mother of Lily and Ethan, first of the gardener's failed seeds. The reel, fed into a decaying projector, flickered to life. Catherine Voss writhed on an altar, mirrors strapped to her skin as acolytes chanted. From her flesh, we birth divinity. The film burned in a sudden blaze, Catherine's screams syncing with the shadow woman's wail. Lucas recoiled. They didn't just kill her. They transfigured her. Elena gripped his arm. Break the cycle. Break her. They followed the crypt's only exit, ascending a spiral staircase carved with Ouroboros symbols. At the top, moonlight speared through a collapsed roof the ruins of the Miller Farms barn. At its center hung a massive mirror, its surface clouded like cataracts. Lucas raised a rock. Wait! The reflection rippled, revealing Emily, alive, crying, trapped. The shadow woman materialized inside the glass. A trade, she hissed. The girl for your sight. Lucas faltered. How? Elena grabbed his wrist. She's lying. Catherine is the mirror. Lucas nodded, tears cutting through grime. Then I'll blind her. He shattered the glass. The barn shook. The shadow woman's scream fractured into echoes, her form dissolving into locusts. Where the mirror stood, a door creaked open, a crude cellar holding Emily's desiccated corpse, vines piercing her ribs. Real this time. Lucas sank to his knees, a decade of grief erupting. Elena approached, her boot disturbing a child's bracelet. Emily, it read. And beside it, a fresh, hand-scrawled note. One seed remains. They burned the barn at dawn. As flames consumed wood and bone, Elena watched Lucas carve Ethan's name into a bullet. "Ending him won't end this," she warned. Lucas pocketed the round. "No, but it'll feel good." At the precinct, Reyes greeted them with a grim dossier photos of Catherine Voss's autopsy. No body, just a coffin filled with mirrored shards. "Looks like you missed a chapter," she said. The final photo froze Elena's blood. 7-year-old Lily Miller, alive, waving from a window. Dated yesterday. That night, Elena dreamed of the barn's ashes. From them sprouted a single black dahlia. Its petals unfolded, revealing a glass eye etched with Ur's chapter bloom. The black dahlia wilted in Elena's fist, its petals crumbling to ash as she woke. Lucas was gone. His motel bed lay cold, the sheets stained with dirt and flecks of dried blood. On the nightstand, he'd left Ethan's bullet and a scribbled note. "Finish it." She raced to the Miller farm, where smoke still coiled from the barn's corpse. Under the remains of the mirror, a fresh hole gaped the tunnel Ethan had dragged Emily into years ago. This time, roots choked its entrance like clenched teeth. Underground, the air tasted of rot and ammonia. Elena's flashlight flickered over walls veined with pulsating fungi. Then, movement, a child's shadow flitting ahead. "Lucas!" she shouted. No answer. Instead, a Polaroid fluttered to her feet. Lucas unconscious in a glass coffin, chrysanthemum sprouting from his mouth. Scrawled in red, "Prune the father, nourish the seed." The tunnel branched into a gallery of mirrors. Each reflection showed Elena a different nightmare. Her brother's suicide, Lucas suffocating in soil, herself stitching mirrors into a child's skin. The shadow woman's voice slithered through the glass. "You could have saved them. You watched." Elena smashed a mirror, but the shriek that followed wasn't her own. Blood dripped from the shards. Human blood. She found Lucas in a greenhouse bathed in sickly green light. His throat was slit, roots suturing the wound as they burrowed into muscle. Alive, but barely. Above him loomed Lily Miller, alive, untouched by decay, her hands tangled in vines that pulsed like arteries. "They lied," she whispered. "Mama said the garden would make me pure. But it only made me hungry." Elena aimed her gun. Lily tilted her head, her eyes black voids. "You don't understand. Ethan was wrong. I'm not his sister anymore. I'm hers." She gestured to the greenhouse ceiling, where the shadow woman's tattered robes billowed like storm clouds. Vines snaked around Elena's ankles. "Heal Lucas," she bargained, "and I'll take his place." Lily laughed, a sound like wind through dead leaves. "The garden doesn't heal. It consumes." She pressed her palm to Lucas's chest. The roots writhed, flooding his veins with chlorophyll. His eyes snapped open, irises blooming into bloodshot sunflowers. "Elena, run," he choked. But his limbs contorted, cracking bones reshaping into gnarled wood. Elena fled deeper into the greenhouse, dodging thorned tendrils. At its heart stood a massive tree, its bark embedded with teeth and glass. Human faces warped beneath its surface, mouths frozen in silent screams. Among them, Emily. Fresh, whole, alive. A root stabbed Elena's thigh, yanking her toward the trunk. "Join us," Emily begged, sap tears streaking her cheeks. "Daddy's almost ready." Lucas lurched into the clearing, half-man, half-rooted horror. His voice echoed from the tree. "She's here. Emily's here." Elena grappled for the scalpel in her belt. "No. She's just another reflection." She plunged the blade into his chest. Sap oozed from the wound, not blood. Lucas gasped, human again, if only for a moment. "Finish it," he rasped. The tree shuddered. Lily emerged from its trunk, her skin bark, her hair ivy. "The garden always wins," she hissed. The shadow woman descended, merging with the tree. Its branches lashed, shattering the greenhouse. Moonlight bled through as Elena dragged Lucas free. Above them, the tree bore fruit, pulsating orbs containing the faces of the missing. Elena hurled a Molotov cocktail scavenged from Lucas's pack. Fire engulfed the tree. The shadow woman's scream split the night, roots thrashing like dying serpents. Lily's bark peeled away, revealing the skeletal girl beneath. "I just wanted to be pure," she wept before crumbling to ash. At the tree's base, Elena found a bone locket. Inside, a lock of Emily's hair and a photo of Catherine Voss holding baby Ethan. On the back, a phrase from the Covenant's creed, "From rot, rebirth." Lucas stirred, his wounds crusted with sap. "Is it over?" Elena stared at the flames. "No. Rot spreads. They left at dawn." Behind them, the greenhouse collapsed, smoke pluming into a crow-shaped cloud. In town, Reyes met them with news, a call from Clearwater. A woman matching Lily's description had boarded a bus north. "She paid with a locket," the driver said. "Emily's locket." Elena pocketed the bone pendant. Some seeds refused to die. Chapter ripened. The cult's locket burned in Elena's pocket as they drove to Clearwater, a town scrubbed from maps, its bones rotting in the Appalachian foothills. Lucas hunched in the passenger seat, his skin still splotched with sap stains. "They'll be waiting," he muttered, reloading his Glock with Ethan's engraved bullet. Elena didn't answer. She'd memorized Catherine Voss's journal on the way. "The mirror well lies beneath the church. Shatter it, and the garden starves." But the final page was torn out, edges charred. Clearwater greeted them with crow carcasses nailed to fence posts. The church's steeple leaned like a broken bone, its windows boarded with mirrors. Inside, pews faced an altar carved from a single tree trunk, branches impaling the ceiling. The air reeked of burnt honey. Lucas traced a finger through dust on the floor, a child's bare footprint. "Emily." Elena shook her head. "Too fresh." "Lily." The basement stairs groaned underfoot. Below, the mirror well was no well at all, a gaping hole lined with shards of polished glass, reflecting infinite versions of themselves. At its edge, Lily Miller knelt, her hair sheared to stubble, hands knitting roots into a doll shaped like Emily. "You're late," she said, voice layered with the shadow woman's rasp. "The eclipse starts soon." "She'll rise." Lucas raised his gun. "Where's my daughter?" Lily smiled, snapping the doll's neck. Roots erupted from the well, slamming Lucas into a wall. "You left her in the fire, Doctor. But we rebuilt her better, cleaner." The doll twitched in her grip, sprouting hair like wheat. Elena lunged, but the floor gave way. They plummeted into the mirror well's kaleidoscopic throat. Darkness gave way to a cavern overgrown with carnivorous flowers, their petals lined with razor teeth. In its center stood a gnarled oak, its trunk split open to reveal Emily half-fused with the wood, her eyes milky orbs. "Daddy," she whispered, sap dribbling down her chin. Lucas staggered toward her. Elena grabbed his arm. "It's a husk." He shook her off. "I have to try." Emily's hand shot out, roots pinning him to the tree. Vines slithered into his ears, nostrils writhing. "Harvest the father, nourish the seed," Lily chanted above. Emily's mouth unhinged, engulfing Lucas's head. Elena fired the bullet, sparked off mirror shards embedded in Emily's chest. Catherine Voss's glass. Elena dodged snapping flowers, racing for the oak. The tree pulsed, coughing up relics. Emily's shoe, Thomas Mercer's locket, Ethan's scalpels. Clawing through them, she found the Covenant's final ritual knife, obsidian, handle wrapped in umbilical cords. "Cut the root," Catherine's journal had said. She plunged it into the oak. The tree screamed. Emily's form disintegrated, vomiting Lucas onto the moss. The cavern quaked, roots retreating like whipped dogs. Lily howled above, her skin sloughing off in bark-like sheets. "You ruin everything." Elena dragged Lucas toward a fissure in the wall, the knife still clutched in her fist. Light pierced the darkness. Moonlight. Eclipse brushed. They surfaced in a cemetery behind the church. Tombstones bore no names, only mirrors. The eclipse hung bloated, turning the sky the color of a bruise. Below, the congregation gathered hooded figures dragging a bound child to the altar. Emily, real, screaming. Lily staggered from the church, her body a lattice of roots and glass. The garden demands balance, Elena. Her life, or yours? Lucas stirred, clawing at the dirt. Don't trust. Elena eyed the knife. Catherine's journal flashed in her mind. The Mirrorwell's key is sacrifice. Not the child, the cult. She hurled the blade into the well. The ground convulsed. Mirrors exploded, shrapnel shredding the congregation. The church collapsed, swallowing Lily's roar. Elena snatched Emily, shielding her from falling debris. Lucas limped behind them, his face a mask of blood and awe. At the cemetery's edge, the earth split, a geyser of black water erupting, carrying remnants of the covenant. Bone, teeth, and the shadow woman's veil. Emily trembled. She's not gone. I dream about her. She hurts. They fled as clear water dissolved into the sinkhole. In the rearview mirror, Elena watched the eclipse wane. Lucas cradled Emily, but the girl's tears dried too fast. Her fingers lingered on the bone pendant around Elena's neck. You feel it too, don't you? Emily whispered. The roots. Growing. Ahead, storm clouds swirled into the shape of a crow. Elena stomped the gas. Some hungers can't be buried. Chapter. Rootbound, the bone pendant grew warmer each night, its whispers coiling around Elena's dreams. The garden isn't a place. It's a covenant. In the apartment above Rhea's garage, Emily slept fitfully, her fingers digging into the mattress as thin roots threaded her veins. Lucas barely spoke, his skin mottled with bark-like scars. But when Elena woke to Emily's empty bed and the pendant missing, she knew. The girl had followed the song in her blood. Reyes met her at the precinct with security footage. Emily hitchhiking toward the Miller farm, her eyes glossed black. They found Lily Miller's locket too, she said, sliding over an evidence bag. Inside, the dried chrysanthemum from Thomas Mercer's grave had regrown, petals plump and crimson. Elena crushed it. It's not over until she says it is. The farm's ruins stank of scorched earth and decay. The sinkhole had collapsed, leaving a jagged mouth in the soil. At its edge, Lucas stood clutching Ethan's bullet, his hollow gaze fixed on the pit. I dreamed of her, he rasped. Emily, but changed. She said the garden needs a new gardener. Before Elena could stop him, he jumped. Underground, the air vibrated with a hum, like a swarm trapped in bone. Elena's flashlight illuminated walls stitched with fused bodies, Clearwater's missing, their limbs twisted into root systems. At the center of the cavern, the heart tree had regrown, its trunk split to reveal Emily suspended in sap, the bone pendant fused to her chest. Lucas knelt beneath her, a thorned vine piercing his throat. Join us, Emily pleaded, her voice Lily's, Catherine's, theirs. Elena raised her gun. Emily's head cocked. You'll miss. She fired. The bullet struck the pendant, fracturing it. The tree shrieked. Roots lashed, but Elena ducked, slashing at Lucas's bindings with the ritual knife. He choked, free but bleeding ichor. Kill it, he gurgled. Kill her. From the shadows, the shadow woman emerged, her form a shifting mass of roots, mirrors, and the faces of every girl taken. You cannot burn us twice. Elena gripped the knife. No. But I can bury you. She rammed the blade into the heart tree. Sap gushed, flooding the cavern with the stench of gangrene. Emily's body slid from the trunk, roots snapping like tendons. The shadow woman recoiled, her fragments scattering into the dark. Lucas crawled to his daughter, cradling her as the cavern trembled. She's breathing, he wept. Elena didn't tell him Emily's breaths matched the dying pulse. The collapse began above. Rocks crushed the fused bodies, sealing the garden's veins. Elena dragged Lucas and Emily toward the surface. Behind them, The shadow woman's wail curdled into Catherine Voss's final scream, a mother betrayed, a goddess unmade. Sunrise found them at the sinkhole's edge. Emily's eyes fluttered open, clear for the first time. "It's quiet now," she whispered. Lucas kissed her forehead, his tears carving paths through grime. Elena turned away. The bone pendant's remnants burned in her pocket. At dusk, Reyes called. Tests confirmed it. Emily's DNA didn't match Lucas's. "She's not his," Reyes said. Birth records list Catherine Voss as her mother, Ethan's sister. Elena stared at the girl asleep on Reyes' couch. Lucas's delusion made flesh. A seed planted years ago. That night, Elena buried the pendant in the woods. The soil shifted, and a single black dahlia sprouted, its bloom a doll's glass eye. A child's laugh echoed Emily's. Lily's then silenced. Back at the car, Lucas waited. Where now? Elena started the engine. Away. Until it follows. They drove until the road ended. In the rear view, storm clouds morphed into a crow, then a veiled woman. Elena didn't flinch. Some roots can't be cut, only endured. But as Emily hummed a hymn from the Covenant's journal, Elena fingered the fresh pendant around her neck, carved from her own rib. For balance. The Toothpick Song, the Leather Puppets chapter, the first mask. Puerto Umbria was a carcass of a town, its bones picked clean by salt and neglect. Fog clung to the docks like a jealous lover, swallowing the cries of gulls and the grumbles of fishermen. Clara Rocha stumbled through the mist, her flask of bourbon burning a hole in her coat pocket. The call had come at a.m. A body on El Cautivo, a ship lost at sea now rotting at port as if spat back by the abyss. She tightened her gloves, the leather cracking like old skin. The ship groaned as Clara boarded, her boots sinking into wood softened by decades of brine. Flashlight beams cut through the dark, revealing walls studded with barnacles that glittered like wet teeth. Merrick Voss, the hacker, trailed behind, his drone whirring overhead. "I'm only here for the Wi-Fi ghosts," he muttered, adjusting his thermal goggles. His paranoia had a pulse. He scanned for signals in the static. The corpse hung from the mast, crucified on fishing nets. Clara's breath hitched not at the guts spilling like kelp from the torso, but at the mast. Porcelain smooth wax, glowing bone white under her light. The smile stretched too wide, stitched shut with rusted fishhooks. Merrick gagged. "That's not a face," he said. Clara leaned closer. The mask wasn't just worn, it was fused, melted into flesh. Inside the chest cavity, something clicked. Marek's drone zoomed in. A marionette, its limbs carved from whalebone, dangled where the heart should be. Its joints were strung with wire, each segment etched with musical notes. Clara recognized the tune Diente de Leon, a lullaby mothers once sang to children born with crooked teeth. Legends claimed it summoned the Dama de los Dientes to straighten them. Clara pried the mask loose. Underneath, the face was gone, stripped to muscle, lips sewn into a permanent scream. Marek's goggles flickered. The thermal signature. There's something inside the wax. She scraped a sample. The mask wasn't wax. It was adipocere, corpse fat rendered into a candle-like shell. The killer had boiled human remains to sculpt perfection. "Check the mouth," Marek whispered. The victim's teeth, all intact, had Morse code drilled into the enamel. Clara ran a trembling finger over the grooves. Dash. Straight face. LUC Marek's drone translated aloud. "Luke," he paled. "Like Lucius? The shrink who vanished." The ship creaked, a low moan that mimicked a human voice. Somewhere, a music box tinkled the lullaby, warped and slow. Clara's flask slipped from her hand, shattering on the deck. The liquid pooled, reflecting the mast. A shape flickered in the glass. A woman's silhouette, jaw unhinged like a serpent's. Marek didn't see it. "We need to go," he insisted, clutching a portable router like a talisman. "This place is fishing for our data. Or our souls." Back on shore, Clara dissected the marionette. Its skull was a human molar, hollowed out. Inside, a scroll, a charcoal sketch of a lady with iron teeth, floating above a village. Victims knelt before her, offering their mouths. Clara's hands shook. She'd seen that face before in childhood fever dreams, after her father drowned. The Dama had whispered promises in wet, clicking syllables. That night, Clara drank until the dock lights blurred. She peeled back her lip, staring into a compact mirror. Her molars were stained amber from bourbon and neglect. What if my teeth aren't mine? The thought slithered in, borrowed from the killer's madness. Outside, fog swallowed the streetlights. Somewhere, wire strings plucked a note. At a.m., her phone rang. A distorted voice hummed Diente de Leon. She answered, silent. On the line, wet breathing, then a laugh, a wet, clicking sound, like teeth clacking together. The call died. On her bathroom mirror, fogged by steam, someone had drawn a smiley face in grease. The lips were hooks. Chapter: The Whispers of the Fog. Marek's lair was a nest of blinking screens and frayed cables, hidden in the attic of an abandoned cannery. The walls were papered with frequency maps and conspiracy boards, red strings connecting Lucius Carvan's name to phrases like dental alchemy and skin sermons. Tonight, he hunted signals. Radio waves slithered through Puerto Umbria's fog, and he'd rigged a cobbled-together receiver to intercept them. Static hissed like a living thing. At a.m., the airwaves screamed. Marek's monitors flared with a burst of encrypted data, a looping audio file masked as white noise. He peeled back layers of code, fingers trembling. The software decoded it into a melody. Piano notes, warped and waterlogged. Diente de Leon. Not the lullaby's usual sweetness, but a dirge, slower, hungrier. Marek's headphones shuddered. Beneath the music, whispers. Dozens of voices overlapping. She tastes the lies in your molars. He traced the signal's origin. Coordinates flickered on his GPS map. El Teatro del Marana, a derelict opera house sunk into the marshes. Local lore claimed performers there vanished in the S, leaving behind costumes sewn from human hair. Marek's thermal drone buzzed toward it, feeding back footage of collapsed balconies and a stage carpeted in black fungi. The signal pulsed strongest in the orchestra pit. Clara found him knee-deep in swamp water, wading into the theater's carcass. "This is how people die in horror movies," she barked, flashlight cutting through vines. Marek ignored her, dragging a decayed trunk from the pit. Inside, a wax cylinder phonograph, its brass horn twisted into the shape of a gaping mouth. The label read, "Recital for the Toothless Lady." The cylinder still spun, playing the lullaby on repeat. "It's a relay," Marek breathed. "Someone's using analog tech to transmit digitally untraceable. This thing's been broadcasting for over a century." Clara touched the phonograph. The wax was warm, throbbing like flesh. Marek's Geiger counter ticked wildly, not radiation, but a frequency that made their fillings ache. "It's a prayer," Clara realized. The Dama's followers kept her alive through sound. Back in his lair, Marek dissected the phonograph. Beneath the wax, human teeth served as gears. Molars etched with circuitry connected to a tiny speaker. "This isn't just old," he muttered. "It's hybrid. Someone merged Victorian tech with modern encryption." Lucius must have. A shadow flickered on his monitors. The audio file was self-replicating, spreading to his hard drives. The lullaby played backward now, guttural, choking. Clara woke him the next night. Marek had passed out at his desk, a code scrawled in red marker on his arms. Ella Tooth's dental notation. "You sleepwalked into the cemetery," she said, showing him photos. He dug up a child's grave from, its headstone engraved with a songbird made of teeth. "You kept muttering, 'The lullaby isn't sound. It's a wire.'" They returned to the theater at dawn. The phonograph was gone. In its place, a porcelain doll with Mara Coles faced the second victim. Her jaw unhinged, playing a new message. Merrick decrypted it. A list of GPS coordinates. All led to the town's old psychiatric hospital. The doll's eyes followed them, glass irises cracking as the recording hissed. "Come hear my teeth sing." That night, Marek's nightmares dripped with static. He stood in a velvet-draped room, wires sutured to his teeth, each strand humming with the lullaby. A shadow coiled in the corner, jagged iron jaw, hands like dental pliers. "You've been peeking," the Dama crooned, her voice spliced with Clara's. "Let me fix your signal." He woke as his computer exploded in sparks, monitors displaying a single repeating glyph, a tooth wrapped in radio waves. Clara found him shivering in the cannery, disassembling his equipment. "It's in the sound," he rasped. "The lullaby, it's a carrier wave. It doesn't just summon her. It rewires your brain. Makes you see what she wants." He played a clean clip of the song. Clara's reflection in the window twisted, her teeth blackened, elongating into fangs. Outside, fog thickened. Somewhere, a phonograph wheezed to life again. Chapter: The List of the Condemned. The psychiatric hospital loomed like a cracked molar against the gray sky. Its windows were boarded with planks warped into sneers, and ivy snarled around the pillars like unbrushed hair. Clara clutched Lucius Carvin's patient registry, recovered from a hidden drawer in his abandoned office, its pages reeking of mildew and clove oil. Merrick adjusted his night vision goggles. "Smells like a cemetery's mouth," he said, kicking open the rusted gate. Inside, the air tasted metallic. Water-stained wallpaper peeled into spirals resembling tongues. They split up. Clara scoured the administrative wing, flashlight skittering over filing cabinets labeled therapy notes, dash. Merrick hacked into a decrepit server room, its terminals fossilized beneath cobwebs. "This place is a hard drive graveyard," he muttered, wiping dust from floppy disks marked patient audio logs. Clara found the ledger in a steel locker welded shut. Inside lay a leather-bound tome, its pages filled with spidery cursive. Lucius's notes detailed curative experiments on patients. Each entry ended with the same phrase: "Subject exhibits stage auditory and cutaneous hallucinations. Dama resonance confirmed." Clipped to the last page, a Polaroid of a woman's silhouette carved into a birch tree, her jaws lined with rusty nails. Merrick slotted a floppy disk into his modified reader. Static hissed, then a voice. "July, patient reports a woman stitching her lips with piano wire. Teeth ache during episodes. Prescribed hypnosis and fluoride rinses." The recording warped into gibberish except for a faint hum. Marek's spectrogram identified it. Diente de Leon, slowed to a subsonic rumble. Clara flipped to a dog-eared page. Asterisk Evan V. Munchausen by proxy. Symptoms: self-diagnosed leprosy. Claims: maggots nest in molars. Last entry: subject insists Dama de los Dientes harvested his vocal cords during dialysis. Recommends termination of treatment. A photo fell out: Evan's corpse from chapter maskless, his mouth stuffed with moth wings. Merrick played another log. A child's voice whimpered. "She comes when I lie. Says my teeth are rotten with secrets." Behind the words, the lullaby surged, sharp and serrated. Clara's fillings buzzed. She pressed a hand to her jaw, her molars throbbed in sync with the rhythm. Marek's laptop screen fractured into pixelated teeth, each biting the framed chapter. The List of the Condemned. The psychiatric hospital loomed like a cracked molar against the slate-gray sky. Its windows were boarded with planks bent into sneers, and ivy throttled the pillars like unbrushed hair. Clara clutched Lucius Carvin's patient registry, its pages stiff with mildew and the sharp tang of clove oil. Merrick adjusted his night vision goggles, the lenses flickering green. "It smells like a cemetery's mouth," he muttered, kicking open the rusted gate. Inside, the air tasted metallic. Water-stained wallpaper curled into spirals that resembled tongues. They split up. Clara scoured the administrative wing, her flashlight skittering over filing cabinets labeled therapy notes, dash. Merrick vanished into a server room, its terminals fossilized under cobwebs and dust. "This place is a hard drive graveyard," he hissed, wiping grime from floppy disks marked patient audio logs. Clara found the ledger in a steel locker welded shut, its hinges weeping rust. Inside lay a leather-bound tome, pages filled with spidery cursive. Lucius's notes detailed curative experiments on patients. Each entry ended with the same phrase: "Subject exhibits stage auditory and cutaneous hallucinations. Dama resonance confirmed." Clipped to the last page, a Polaroid of a woman's silhouette carved into a birch tree, her jaws studded with rusted nails. Merrick slotted a floppy disk into his jury-rigged reader. Static hissed, then a voice. "July, patient reports a woman stitching her lips with piano wire. Teeth ache during episodes. Prescribed hypnosis and fluoride rinses." The recording dissolved into garbled noise except for a faint hum. Marek's spectrogram identified it. Diente de Leon, slowed to a subsonic growl. Clara flipped to a dog-eared page. Evan V. Munchausen by proxy. Symptoms: self-diagnosed leprosy. Claims: maggots nest in molars. Last entry: subject insists Dama de los Dientes harvested his vocal cords during dialysis. Recommends termination of treatment. A photo slipped from the binding. Evan's corpse from chapter maskless, his mouth stuffed with moth wings. Marek played another log. A child's voice whimpered. "She comes when I lie. Says my teeth are rotten with secrets." Beneath the words, the lullaby surged, sharp as a scalpel. Clara's fillings buzzed. She pressed a hand to her jaw. Her molars throbbed in time with the rhythm. Marek's laptop screen fractured into pixelated teeth, each biting the edges of the frame. In the ledger's margins, Lucius had scribbled equations, variables like delta, decay rate, and phi, auditory resonance. Clara traced a formula linking dental attrition to hallucinatory susceptibility. A footnote referenced the Ossuary Choir, a cult that allegedly sang using human jawbones. Below, a diagram showed a marionette made of molars, its strings wired to a gramophone. A crash echoed from the east wing. Marek's drone streaked toward the sound, revealing a collapsed ceiling and a crawlspace beneath. Clara wedged herself through debris, her boots crunching glass vials labeled hydrogen peroxide, dental grade. The crawlspace opened into an operating theater. The walls were tiled with broken mirrors, each shard reflecting a sliver of the room and the thing on the table. A corpse, flayed from neck to navel, its ribcage splayed like a puppet stage. Inside, a marionette of braided nerves and teeth dangled from sinew strings. The face was Mara Coles, the second victim, her eyelids sewn shut with fishing line. A music box nestled in her pelvis, playing Diente de Leon backwards. Clara's nausea surged. The air smelled of wet iron and clove oil. Marek's voice crackled over the radio, found Lucius's terminal. He was live-streaming. Footage flickered on Clara's phone, a shadowed figure in a porcelain mask, carving symbols into teeth. The feed cut to static except for a final frame. A woman stood behind Lucius, her jaw unhinged, iron teeth glinting. Her hands rested on his shoulders. Lucius was smiling. They reconvened in the server room. Marek's laptop displayed a list of IP addresses. Lucius broadcasted the patient's sessions. Dark web forums paid to watch. The Dama's lullaby was crowdsourced. Clara flipped to the ledger's last page. A patient list ended with 2 words, batch complete. Below, a new name scrawled in fresh ink, Clara Rocha. The lights died. Marek's goggles flared, capturing thermal blooms in the hallway, shapes slithering like eels. Clara's flashlight revealed nothing but the mirrors. In the shards, figures crouched, jaws clicking in unison. The music box's tune accelerated. Clara's teeth ached. Chapter: The Ossuary Choir. The mirrors shattered. Clara dropped her flashlight as glass rained down, slicing her palms. In the jagged shards, the crouching figures lunged not toward her, but through the reflections, their jaws distended, teeth clattering like castanets. Merrick yanked her backward, his thermal goggles glowing as he fired his taser at empty air. "They're not here," he screamed. "They're in the signal." They fled down a corridor lined with barred cells, the music box's reversed lullaby echoing. Clara's phone buzzed a notification from Lucius's dark web feed. Livestream comments scrolled. "Pay to unmute the song. I want to hear her teeth." Static exploded from Marek's laptop. His screen displayed a waveform of Diente de Leon, spikes sharp as fangs. Outside, the marsh swallowed the hospital. Fog coiled around Clara's ankles as Merrick hacked into the hospital's archaic network. Lucius routed the broadcasts through a relay, he gasped. The signals converged somewhere called El Coro de Huesos. Clara's blood chilled. The ossuary choir. A crypt mentioned in Lucius's ledger, where cultists sang with the dead. They traced the coordinates to a drowned chapel, its steeple spearing the surface of a black lagoon. Rotten pews floated like ribs. Merrick anchored his drone to a mossy gargoyle, its mouth stuffed with molars. The chapel's submerged nave glittered embedded with thousands of teeth, each wired to copper filaments. "An antenna," Merrick whispered. They turned the dead into a transmitter. Diving into the chapel's belly, Clara gagged on the silt-thick water. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent lichen, illuminating frescoes of the Dhamma conducting a skeletal orchestra. Marek's underwater camera revealed a pulpit. A fused spine held a hymn book written on stretched skin. The notes matched Diente de Leon. In the sacristy, they found a generator still humming. Merrick rebooted it. Floodlights flared, illuminating a chandelier of braided jawbones. The room shuddered as the hymn book's pages flapped, emitting a haunting vibrato. Clara's fillings burned. "It's amplifying the lullaby," she rasped. "The chapel's a relay tower. The Dhamma's using it to broadcast herself." Merrick pried open a corroded server rack. Ancient hard drives whirred, their labels peeling. Patient, Maria K. Evan V. He connected his laptop. These aren't logs. They're brainwave recordings. The files played, agonized screams overlaid with the lullaby. Each victim's final moments, digitized and sold. Bidders in the chat requested more dental close-ups. Clara stumbled into a confession booth. Inside hung marionettes made of finger bones, their strings hooked to a rotary phone. She lifted the receiver. A child's voice giggled. "Want to hear a secret?" The line hissed. Diente de Leon played, and Clara's tongue bled. Her molars had bitten deep. Merrick dragged her out as water surged. The chapel groaned, collapsing. His drone feed showed shadowy figures wading toward them, mouths glowing with porcelain masks. Clara's phone buzzed a new follower on Lucius's feed at Dhamma Official. The profile pic, iron teeth glinting in fog. They surfaced in the reeds. Clara's reflection rippled, her jawline shifting, teeth yellowing. Merrick injected her with adrenaline. "The song's rewiring you," he hissed. "We need to destroy the transmitter." He remote accessed the chapel's generator. Sparks erupted underwater, followed by a subsonic wail, the jawbone chandelier exploding. In the silence, Clara's phone lit up. At Dhamma Official had posted a video. Lucius, strapped to a dental chair, lips peeled back. A masked figure fed his teeth into a grinder, whispering, "Your lies taste sweet." The caption, "Hours until next recital." Coordinates flashed Clara's childhood home. Back at the cannery, Clara stared at her father's old nautical maps. Red X's marked shipwrecks linked to the Dhamma's victims. Merrick wiped code off a grease-stained mirror. L glowed beneath. "It's a frequency," he realized. "A doorbell. The cult's summoning her to finish us." Clara's phone rang. Caller ID, unknown. She answered. A wet click, then a hum. Diente de Leon. Her reflection mouthed, "Come home." Chapter: The House of Open Mouths. Clara's childhood home hunched at the marsh's edge, its porch sagging like a dislocated jaw. The walls were scaly with rot, and the windows gaped glass replaced by wire mesh stuffed with moss. Merrick adjusted his goggles, scanning for thermal anomalies. "Your dad's maps marked this place as a shipwreck site," he said. Clara ignored him, her teeth humming in time with the lullaby still looping on her phone. The caller ID now read, Dama's guest list. Inside, the air reeked of brine and burnt hair. Floral wallpaper bled into black mold, the pattern resolving into mouths mid-scream. Clara's flashlight caught a taxidermied raccoon nailed above the fireplace, its paws replaced with dentures. Marek's drone buzzed upstairs, its feed glitching. "There's a room up there," he muttered. "Walls are covered in film reels?" The attic was a throat. Hundreds of film strips dangled from the rafters, each frame depicting a toothless corpse. A projector sat bolted to the floor, its lens fogged with algae. Merrick threaded a reel labeled Clara, AGE static, then grainy footage. Clara's father adjusting a wire helmet on her head, electrodes glued to her molars. Her child self screamed silently as a needle dragged across a wax cylinder. "He was recording you," Merrick said. The audio crackled a warble of Diente de Leon mixed with Clara's childhood sobs. She ripped the reel free, slicing her palm. The blood sizzled where it hit the projector, etching a symbol into the metal. Your dad wasn't just a fisherman. He was modifying you. Like Lucius's patience." Downstairs, the house groaned. Clara's reflection in a hallway mirror flickered, her teeth lengthening, gums blackening. Marek's Geiger counter spasmed. "The signal's stronger here. There's a basement." They pried open a trapdoor beneath the rotted rug. Stairs spiraled into darkness, the wood groaning like a jaw unhinging. The basement was a wet black vault. Marek's infrared light revealed walls papered with nautical charts. Red threads connected Clara's home to sunken ships, each labeled with names from Lucius's patient list. A corkboard displayed baby teeth pierced with fishhooks. At the room's heart sat a machine, part dental chair, part radio tower, its antennae strung with nerve tissue. "It's a resonator," Merrick said, wiping grime from the control panel. "Your dad was amplifying the Dama's signal through you. Using your teeth as..." He paused. A film reel whirred to life on the wall. Clara's mother appeared, strapped to the chair, her mouth forced open by iron clamps. A shadow with a serrated jaw leaned over her, humming Diente de Leon as it extracted a molar. Clara's phone rang. Unknown again. She answered. Her mother's voice, waterlogged and frayed. "You were born to sing for her." The call dropped. Merrick pried open the resonator's guts, human molars soldered to vacuum tubes, each etched with the same L symbol. "This thing's a transmitter and a receiver. It's why the Dama's fixated on you. You're her." "Microphone," Clara finished. Her gums burned. She spat a tooth into her palm, a premolar, its roots entwined with copper wire. Merrick recoiled. "It's growing back," she whispered. "New ones. Different." The replacement tooth gleamed, sharp as a shark's. A crash upstairs. The drone feed showed figures in porcelain masks boarding a skiff outside, their movements jerky, synchronized. Merrick armed his taser. "Cult's here to service the resonator. We need to burn this place. Now." Clara hesitated, staring at the chair. A child's voice echoed from the machine. "Join the choir, Clara." Chapter: The Crown of Worms. The fire roared, twisting Clara's childhood home into a skeletal silhouette. Embers spat, teeth incisors and canines raining into the marsh, hissing as they sank. Merrick dragged Clara into the reeds, their boots slurping mud. Behind them, the cultists' porcelain masks glowed in the inferno, their jaws clacking in unison. Clara's new tooth pulsed, its roots burrowing deeper. They staggered to a derelict boathouse, its roof sagging under nests of rusted fishing gear. Inside, Clara's flashlight caught a trapdoor beneath a moldy tarp. Merrick pried it open, revealing a steep drop into a concrete bunker. The walls were lined with vacuum tubes and yellowed dental diagrams. A desk held a reel-to-reel recorder, its spools crusted with salt. Marek threaded the tape. A man's voice, Clara's father, rasped. Day, the Dama's song etched the symbol L into Clara's teeth. She's the only one who survived the resonance. The others, they chewed their own tongues out. Background noise, a child crying. Clara's thumb found her sharpened molar. I was his lab rat, she whispered. Marek hacked into a rusted terminal. There's a server here. It's archiving the Dama's rituals. Footage loaded, a coastal cave, its entrance choked with barnacles. Inside, a throne of whalebone crusted with human molars. The timestamp. Tonight, high tide. Marek cursed. They're crowning her. The ritual completes at midnight. Clara's jaw cracked. She gagged, spitting a writhing clump of hair-thin wires into her palm, dental sutures, crawling like worms. Marek recoiled. Your teeth are growing infrastructure. Antennas. You're becoming a relay tower. Clara's reflection in a shattered monitor flickered. Her mouth bristled with iron spines. Splashing echoed outside. The cultists waded through the marsh, their masks reflecting the moon. One raised a curved blade, a dentist's scalpel fused with a radio antenna. Marek armed his taser. They're herding us to the cave. But if we take out the throne, maybe we disrupt the signal. They fled in a rotted skiff, Clara's teeth humming louder with every stroke. The cave emerged at the cliff base, its mouth foaming with black water. Inside, bioluminescent algae coated the walls, painting scenes of the Dama feasting on shipwrecked sailors. Their boat ground against a sandbar. Marek's drone lit the throne room. The whalebone throne throbbed. Its armrests were jawbones, wired to a makeshift console of salvaged ship parts. Clara's father's voice boomed from hidden speakers. The crown binds the choir. Only my blood can conduct the final verse. A rusted circlet hung above the throne, a crown of dental drills and baby teeth. Marek jammed his laptop into the console, code flooding the screen. The throne's a biocircuit. It needs a living conductor. Clara's tooth flared. The Dama materialized in the shadows, her iron jaws dripping brine. She pointed a finger bone at Clara. Marek's drone exploded, shrapnel embedding in his shoulder. Clara seized the crown. The drill's whirred, biting into her scalp. Visions erupted. The Dama, centuries ago, a nun drowned for extracting sinners' teeth. Her hatred fused with the tides, her lullaby infecting radio waves. The throne's machinery clanked awake. Clara's teeth vibrated, broadcasting Diente de Leon into the cave's acoustics. Marek tackled her, snapping the crown's wires. The Dama shrieked, her form distorting into static. The cave quaked, stalactites plunging. Clara's voice merged with the song, her new teeth amplifying it into an ultrasonic wail. The cultists' masks shattered, revealing hollow skulls filled with swarming shipworms. Water surged. The throne collapsed, crushing the console. The Dama dissolved into a swarm of iron filings, her song fading but not before whispering to Clara, "You carry my code now." As the cave flooded, Marek dragged Clara to the surface. She vomited seawater and copper wire. Her phone lit up at Dama Official was live. The feed showed Clara's face, her teeth shimmering like radio dials, chapped static veins. Clara's teeth hummed like live wires, her gums knitting around copper roots. Marek steered the skiff through the marsh's fog, its tendrils clawing at their clothes. Behind them, the cave's collapse still echoed, a wet, metallic groan swallowed by the night. Clara's phone buzzed. The Dama Official live feed now showed her hands, tendons flickering with static. They docked at a derelict radio tower, its skeletal frame listing in the muck. Marek slung his toolkit over one shoulder, blood seeping through his bandaged arm. The L frequency. It's not just a signal. It's a language, he muttered, rewiring a corroded junction box. Clara's jaw ached. When she spat, her saliva sparkled with iron filings. Inside the tower, moth-eaten soundproofing hung like rotten flesh. Merrick booted AS transmitter, its tubes glowing dull orange. Clara's reflection in the cracked control panel showed her molars elongating, their edges serrated. "Your dad's notes mentioned a failsafe," Merrick said. "A way to reverse the resonance. We need to drown her song in white noise." A cultist's blade exploded through the wall. Merrick tasered the masked figure, but 3 more clambered in, their porcelain faces cracked, mouths bristling with nails. Clara fought. Her new teeth tore through a wrist, blood spurting in black arcs. The taste was burnt copper and spoiled milk. Merrick jammed a cable into the tower's mainframe. "I'm rerouting the Dama's broadcast through this heap. If we overload it," the screen flared, a waveform of Diente de Leon twisted into a scream. Clara's teeth vibrated, chipping the mic she gripped. "Do it!" she roared, her voice layered with 100 whispers. The tower shuddered. Amplifiers whined, blowing out windows. Clara's vision splintered memories not her own. The Dama, centuries past, stitching hymns into sailors' teeth as they drowned. Marek's hands flew over the controls. "Almost got it." The cultists froze, their masks melting into liquid porcelain that pooled like mercury. A feedback loop erupted. Clara's teeth sang, the tower's antenna glowing red-hot. The Dama's voice flooded the room, raw and jagged. "You are my tongue." Clara collapsed, convulsing as iron roots split her skin, veins bulging with radio static. Merrick dragged her outside as the tower imploded, steel girdles snapping like wishbones. Dawn bled gray over the marsh. Clara's wounds crusted with rust. Merrick injected her with adrenaline, his hands shaking. "We need to find the source. The original broadcast cite your father's ship." Clara's phone buzzed. A voicemail from her dead mother. "The siren's grin awaits. Bring your new voice." The siren's grin lay half-sunk in a cove, its hull barnacled and split. Clara's father's research vessel. They waded through knee-deep water, eels darting from portholes. The bridge was a shrine, nautical maps pinned with human molars, a sonar screen cracked like a skull. Merrick pried open a sealed locker. Inside, wax cylinders labeled Clara's lullabies. He loaded one into a phonograph. The needle hissed, then her father's voice. "The Dama's song is a bridge." Clara's teeth. "They're the first step to resurrecting her." Clara's reflection in the sonar screen grinned sharp. Too many teeth. The ship groaned. Water roared into the hold as rusted seams split. Merrick smashed the phonograph, but the song continued, pouring from Clara's throat. The Dama materialized in the sonar static, her iron jaws unhinging. "You've brought me home," she hissed. Clara's teeth tore through her lips, answering in chorus. Merrick triggered a flare, its crimson light searing the Dama's form into ash. The ship sank, dragging them into black water. Clara's lungs filled with static, her bones buzzing. As darkness took her, the Dama's whisper coiled deep. "You'll sing louder underwater." Marek's goggles flickered a final glimpse of teeth glowing in the deep, tuning to a new frequency. Chapter, The Tuning Fathoms. Clara woke in the marsh's underbelly, silt seeping into her nostrils, her lungs heavy with brackish water. Her teeth glowed faintly, lighting the murk. Merrick floated nearby, unconscious, his thermal goggles cracked. She dragged him toward a hump of land, an abandoned lighthouse, its beam dead. The Dama's voice slithered through her molars. "You breathe for me now." Inside the lighthouse, Clara found a makeshift morgue. Autopsy slabs held bloated bodies threaded with seaweed, their jaws wired open. Merrick stirred, coughing black fluid. The ship, the flare. He stared at Clara's reflection in a fogged mirror, her gums receded, teeth fused into serrated plates. "You're adapting," he rasped. "Like the Dama." Clara's tongue probed her new teeth. They vibrated, decoding the marsh's ambient noise into fractured lyrics. Drown the choir, crown the static. Merrick hacked into a waterlogged terminal bolted to the wall. This lighthouse monitored your dad's experiments. There's a vault below us. It's a library. 4 oral histories. The vault's door peeled open with a metallic scream. Inside, shelves sagged under jars of pickled tongues, each labeled with GPS coordinates. A reel-to-reel recorder spun silently. Clara pressed play. A woman's voice, not the Dama's. I tried to stop him. My husband Clara's father mutilated those sailors to trap her song. But the Dama's not a ghost. She's a frequency. Merrick traced the coordinates on a nautical chart. These tongues were harvested from shipwrecks. Your dad mapped the Dama's signal through their decay. Clara's phone buzzed at Dama official streamed live. A underwater cave, its walls studded with molars. A masked figure adjusted a microphone shaped like a jawbone. The caption: Final movement. Rain lashed the lighthouse. Clara's teeth hummed in harmony with the storm. Merrick rigged the terminal to transmit white noise, sweat mixing with rain. If we jam her signal here, the cave broadcast might. A wet crunch silenced him. Clara turned. Marek's laptop screen displayed his thermal feed. A figure stood behind them, jaw unhinged, tongue replaced with a radio antenna. The figure lunged. Clara bit down, her teeth shearing through its neck. Black oil spurted, sizzling where it touched her skin. Merrick gasped, "That's not a cultist. It's a relay." The corpse twitched, its antenna broadcasting Diente de Leon into the terminal. The lighthouse's beam flickered alive, spinning, projecting the Dama's silhouette across the marsh. Merrick rebooted the white noise. The vault's full of her oral histories. We need to delete them, erase her voice. Clara smashed the tongue jars, rancid liquid pooling. The floor shuddered. A trapdoor yawned open, revealing a flooded stairwell. Below, a cathedral-sized fish tank glowed, suspended skeletons inside singing through algae-clogged throats. Clara dove in. The water sharpened her senses, her teeth tuned to the skeleton's chorus. They pointed toward a sealed chamber. Inside floated a woman's corpse, her mouth sutured shut with antique telephone wire. Clara recognized the voice from the reel-to-reel tape. "Mom," she tried to say, bubbles bursting into static. The corpse's eyes snapped open. Copper wire erupted from its mouth, lashing Clara's wrists. The Dama's laughter gurgled through the water. Merrick plunged in, taser firing, severing the wires. Clara surfaced, hauling her mother's corpse. Merrick pried open the sutures. A wax cylinder rolled out, labeled Last Confession. They played it. Clara's mother, weeping. My husband thought he could control the Dama by embedding her song in Clara's teeth. But the Dama's older. She's not a ghost. She's what happens when hatred lives in the wires. A crash. The recording ended with wet tearing. The lighthouse beam died. Outside, the marsh boiled. The cultist skiffs swarmed, their masks glowing with bioluminescent teeth. Clara's phone, lit at Dama officials, streamed the lighthouse, zooming on her face. The chat screamed, "Here's the mic." Clara grabbed the lighthouse's horn, her teeth buzzing. "You want a song?" she growled, and screamed Diente de Leon into the metal. The horn exploded, glass and sound shredding the skiffs. Merrick pulled her into the marsh as the lighthouse collapsed. In the debris, the Dama whispered, "Now everyone will hear you." Chapter: The final transmission. The marsh swallowed the lighthouse's rubble, but the Dama's signal strengthened, a shrill, unending tone radiating from Clara's teeth. Merrick dragged her into a corroded drainage tunnel, their breaths sinking with the clank-clank of a distant pump. Clara's reflection in the stagnant water showed her jawline warping, teeth protruding like radio towers. "She's tuning me," Clara rasped, "to broadcast globally at midnight." Merrick uncapped a stolen vial of morphine. "Your dad's notes ended here. But your mom's wax cylinder mentioned an anchor point, the original source." Clara's phone buzzed. An email from userdama.net flickered. Follow the teeth. Attached was a sonar map of the marsh, pulsing red at its heart. They navigated through gnarled mangroves, roots snaking around Clara's ankles. The air thickened with the smell of burnt keratin. Ahead, a rusted dome breached the mud, a Cold War-era radio bunker. Merrick pried the hatch open. Inside, a cathedral of servers, their fans gasping, walls plastered with children's dental x-rays. Clara traced the x-rays. Each set of teeth bore the L symbol. "Not just me," she whispered. Merrick booted a terminal. "Your dad wasn't the first. This place has been tuning kids into transmitters for decades. Failures get." He gestured to a vat of liquid mercury, floating molars gleaming inside. A generator whirred to life. The bunker screens lit with Dama officials feed Clara's face, morphed with Adama's iron jaws. Viewers chimed in. "Can't wait for the drop. You are teeth gonna fix the world." Clara smashed the screen. "How do we end this?" Merrick yanked open a floor grate. The anchors below. They descended into a flooded chamber, water up to their chests. Clara's teeth buzzed, repelling gnarled eels. At the center stood a granite slab, its surface etched with tidal charts and dental diagrams. A corpse lay atop it, Clara's father, mummified, his mouth sewn shut with copper wire. Merrick cut the wires. The corpse's jaw fell open, disgorging a cassette tape labeled Termination Protocol. The bunker trembled as Merrick played it. Clara's father's voice, shaking. "The Damas anchored to a host. To kill her, the host must..." A scream drowned the rest. Clara's phone updated. "PM. Host. You mean me?" Clara's teeth vibrated, her voice layered with the Damas. Merrick gripped her shoulders. "We'll overload the signal. Turn her own frequency against her." He wired her molars to the bunker servers, transfusion needles biting into her gums. "When I say, scream." The cultists arrived, rotted skiffs crashing through the bunker walls. Their masks hung broken, faces riddled with radiostatic tumors. Clara's teeth convulsed, her jaw unhinging. Merrick typed furiously, the servers overheating. "Now!" Clara screamed, her voice a feedback loop of Diente de Leon and white noise. The cultists burst like wet fuses. The bunker's walls bled rust as the Dama manifested a silhouette of iron filings and broken teeth. "You are mine," she howled, clawing at Clara. Merrick triggered the overload. Clara's teeth shattered, their roots tearing free, each fragment a tiny transmitter hurling the Dama's song into oblivion. The Dama frayed, her voice dissolving into cosmic static. Water surged as the bunker collapsed. Merrick grabbed Clara, now toothless and bleeding, and kicked toward the surface. The last server screen flickered. Dama official stream showed only snow, the chat flooded with "What happened?" and "Bring her back." Dawn broke over the marsh. Clara spat a final tooth into the muck. An incisor, etched with L. Merrick bandaged her gums. "It's done." But as they limped away, Clara's tongue found a bud, a new tooth, sharp and cold, thrumming with the faintest hum. Her phone buzzed one last time. New follower at Clara official. Tears of the last cradle. Legacy of the bloody midwife chapter. The first empty cradle. The storm clawed at the San Ildefonso hospital like a starved beast. Rain lashed the fogged windows of the neonatal wing, where Nurse Graciela Mora paced the dim hallway. Her flashlight trembled. The power had died an hour earlier, but the generator's rusted relics from the S remained silent. She cursed under her breath. This is why cities laugh at rural hospitals, she thought, her shoes squeaking against linoleum stained with shadows. Room B held 6 cradles. 5 whimpered softly. The 6th lay still. Graciela froze. The empty mattress bore no blood, no struggle, only a faint smell of burnt almonds. Her throat tightened. Sophia's child. The mother, a year-old with eyes hollowed by exhaustion, slept in the adjacent room, unaware. Graciela's flashlight darted across the walls. A glint caught her eye, A glass vial hung from the crib's railing, filled with a silver-threaded liquid. Breast milk. But deeper, darker. Something metallic swirled within. Detective Alma Diaz arrived at dawn. The vial now sat in an evidence bag, its contents slurring light like mercury. Alma's gloves were too thin. She felt the cold of the room seep into her bones. No fingerprints, she muttered, studying the crib. No footprints, either, despite the mud outside. Only a single strand of navy blue thread tangled around the vial's neck. It matched the embroidery on the hospital curtains, the same shade as the village's mourning ribbons. The lab results came back at noon. Mercury, the toxicologist said, voice crackling over Alma's phone. Enough to kill an elephant. Mixed with lipids. Human. Alma's gaze drifted to Sophia, now wailing in the chapel. The girl's screams harmonized with the wind. Through the stained glass, a pine forest swayed a chorus of skeletal hands. Graciela found Alma in the records room. "This isn't the first time," she whispered, clutching a faded file. Clara Vole, a midwife, accused of stillborn disappearances. All evidence vanished. The case dissolved like smoke. Graciela's hands shook. They called her La Partera de las Sombras, the midwife of shadows. Alma flipped through the file. A photo fluttered out Clara, her eyes twin voids, holding a bundle wrapped in a shroud stitched with alchemical symbols. The same symbols now glimmered on the vial's label. That night, Alma dreamt of her daughter, Gabby, age twirling in a sunflower dress. But when the girl turned, her chest gaped hollow. "You didn't protect me," she sang, petals falling from her ribs. Alma woke gasping. Her phone buzzed. Another photo from Graciela. A Polaroid from the hospital's attic. Dozens of vials identical to the one from the crib, dusty but intact. Each labeled with dates spanning decades. "Zero, they're trophies," Alma hissed, pacing the cramped attic at a.m. Her breath fogged in the beam of her flashlight. Graciela stood paralyzed by a storage box brimming with tiny wool booties. One pair dripped fresh blood. "Or offerings," the nurse whispered. A floorboard creaked downstairs. Both women froze. The nursery monitor crackled to life, a lullaby, warped and slowed, played in reverse. By morning, Graciela resigned. "I felt it last night," she stammered, stuffing clothes into a suitcase. "A hand on my shoulder. Cold. Smelling of cloves and rot." Alma didn't stop her. She too had seen the shapes, figures flickering at the edge of her vision, always carrying something small and swaddled. The breakthrough came at dusk. Alma traced the vial symbols to a th century grimoire in the village archives. Liber Purorum, a treatise on infantile purity as alchemical catalyst. Beside the book lay a ribbon. Navy blue. No. Its embroidery read, "Cradle of." As Alma dialed the priest, Father, and Rick, the ex-psychiatrist, she noticed 3 ribbons already coiled inside the evidence jar. None had been there before. The third bore a name, Sofia Martinez. Outside, thunder rumbled. Somewhere in the pines, a baby's cry echoed, sharp and brief. Then silence. Chapter, the letters of the red moon. Paragraphs. The ribbon's embroidery glowed under Alma's desk lamp, cradle of its thread the color of dried blood. Father and Rick leaned over her shoulder, his breath smelling of sacramental wine and mint lozenges. "This isn't a countdown," he said, tracing the numbers. "It's a ledger. A receipt." His finger hovered over the alchemical symbol stitched beneath the text, a serpent swallowing its tail, looped around an inverted crescent. The first letter arrived at dawn. Rosa Marine, whose newborn had died of a heart defect 3 weeks prior, opened her mailbox to find an envelope sealed with black wax. Inside, a single line written in brownish ink. "Your son's light extinguishes the rot that gnaws your bones." Rosa's hands trembled. She'd told no one about her leukemia diagnosis. Alma found Father and Rick in the church's undercroft, muttering over a woodcut of the purification of the cradles. The ritual depicted hooded figures offering swaddled infants to a faceless entity wrapped in chains. "The letters are verses from this," he said, tapping the Latin text below. "Pueri puri mundum sanant." Pure children cleanse the world. But someone's modernized them, made them personal. By noon, 6 more letters surfaced, each addressed to parents of the missing infants, each referencing a secret illness. Miguel Torres, whose daughter vanished a week prior, collapsed upon reading, "Her heart stills yours, do not mourn the angel you borrowed." His wife wept. He'd hidden his cardiomyopathy for years. Alma crouched in the forensic van, UV light scraping over the letters. Beneath the ink, faint symbols glowed, the same alchemical circles from Clara Vole's shroud. "They're layered," she told Father and Rick. "The verse is just the surface. The real message is in these diagrams." One showed a womb connected to a coffin by thorned vines. Another, a moon swallowing a crying child. That night, surveillance footage from the post office revealed a figure in a long, tattered coat, a woman, perhaps sliding letters into the drop box. Her face blurred, pixelated. But Alma noticed the shoes, white nursing clogs, speckled with what looked like mud or dried blood. Father Andrick's skepticism fractured at AM. He sat in the rectory, a letter open before him. "Father, you who doubt as Thomas doubted, the children's tears will wash your lies." His hands shook. Only his therapist knew about the suicide attempt in his psychiatry days, the guilt over a patient who believed demons ate her twins. Alma interrogated the parents, pushing for connections. "Did any of you visit Clara Vole? Attend her rituals?" Silence. Then Sofia Martinez, eyes swollen shut from crying, whispered, "Last year, a woman came. Said she could trade pain." She described a figure in an ash-gray cloak, pushing a squeaky pram. She smelled like cloves. Her voice, it sounded like 2 people talking at once. In the lab, mercury vapors hissed under the microscope. The toxicologist called Alma, baffled. "The liquid in those vials? It's not just breast milk. There's placental tissue, stem cells, and something recombinant, like a virus engineered to bind to heavy metals." Alma's stomach turned. Meaning, a pause. Meaning someone's using these kids as biofactories, filtering poison into something useful. A patrolman found Rosa Marine at the riverbank at dusk. She clutched a locket containing her son's ultrasound image, her skin translucent. "I can feel it," she rasped. "The cancer's gone. But my chest, it's hollow." Later, the X-ray would show her ribcage intact. But the MRI revealed shadow serpentine, curling where her heart should be. Alma stormed into Father Andrick's study, waving a soil-stained envelope. "They're taunting us." The latest letter, delivered to a couple whose child was still safe. "Prepare the cradle. The red moon rises hungry." Inside, a lock of hair jet black, tied with a navy ribbon. The mother's scream echoed through the station. It matched her living son's DNA. Midnight. Alma stood over Clara Vole's garden, now a crime scene. Forensic tents glowed like paper lanterns in the drizzle. The first shovelful of dirt unearthed a doll, a crude thing with button eyes and a lead heart. Around its neck hung a tiny vial. Mercury swam inside, reflecting the bloated moon above. One word was etched into the glass. Cradle chapter, the Garden of Whispers, paragraphs. Clara Vole's garden was a corpse. Weeds strangled the rusted gate, and thorned vines coiled like serpents around a shattered trellis. Detective Alma Diaz waded through the rot, her boots sinking into soil that squelched as if breathing. Father and Rick lingered at the gate, rosary clenched in his fist. "This place wants to be found," he muttered. Alma ignored him, her flashlight slicing through the pre-dawn gloom. The first doll surfaced 10 minutes in. A tattered rag figure, its yarn hair caked in mud, button eyes glinting under the beam. Alma knelt. The doll's chest bulged unnaturally. She slit the fabric with her knife, revealing a lead heart cold, engraved with a name, Lucas Marine. The first victim. Father and Rick crossed himself. Not dolls. Effigies. Vessels. By dawn, they unearthed 11 more. Each bore a missing child's name, their lead hearts wrapped in faded hospital bracelets. The 12th doll lay deeper. Alma's shovel struck something hollow. A wooden box, its surface carved with fetal skeletons dancing around a crescent moon. Inside, a journal, its pages brittle, filled with Clara Vole's spidery handwriting. The garden feeds, an entry read. Each sacrifice strengthens the roots. Father and Rick deciphered the symbols scrawled in the margins. Alchemical marriages. Mercury and blood. Innocence exchanged for longevity. His voice faltered. She didn't act alone. The ritual requires a gardener to tend the soil. Alma flipped to a sketch, a cloaked figure watering the earth with a watering can shaped like a ribcage. The wind shifted. A whisper curled through the thorns. Alma, her daughter's voice. Gobbies. Alma spun, flashlight slicing shadows. The dolls lay arranged in a circle, their button eyes now facing her. Father and Rick gripped her arm. Don't engage. It's a trigger. But Gobby's laughter echoed again, closer, tearing at her ribs like a hooked blade. Back at the station, the journal's final entry chilled them. They will blame me. But the gardener walks free. She tends the garden still, her hands gloved in ash. Alma traced a faded photo tucked into the binding. Clara Vole, younger, arm in arm with a woman whose face was scratched out. A caption read, "Vera, my apprentice. The soil sings for her." That night, Alma dreamt of the garden. The dolls crawled toward her, lead hearts clanking, chanting in Gobby's voice, "Cradle awaits." She woke to her phone blaring. A patrol unit had found a fresh burial site behind the church. 14 tiny graves. 12 filled. 2 empty. The soil at the churchyard reeked of cloves. Alma dug alongside forensic techs, her gloves slick with grime. The 13th doll emerged pristine, its dress starched white. No name. Instead, its chest bore a date, the next night's lunar eclipse. Father and Rick paled. The final phase. Harvest under the ice moon. A shriek ripped through the graveyard. One of the techs stumbled back, clutching his hand. The doll's lead heart had split open, releasing a black liquid that hissed against his skin. "It's acidic," he yelled. Alma bagged the doll, noticing a vial sewn into its back, a drop of blood suspended in mercury. The label, "Cradle for the Unborn." Father and Rick retreated to the rectory, poring over Clara's journal. He found it a loose page detailing the Madre's Requiem, a ritual to resurrect stillborn souls using living vessels. "Vera isn't just mimicking Clara," he whispered. "She's perfecting her work." A sketch showed a woman in a nurse's cap, her face half eclipsed by shadow, cradling a doll with her own eyes. Alma drove to Vera Klemt's last known address, a derelict cottage on Somberluna's outskirts. Inside, she found a nursery frozen in time. Dust-coated stuffed animals, a mobile of alchemical symbols, and a crib filled with ash. Taped to the wall was a sonogram dated 8 months prior. Matteo Klemt, scrawled beneath. No record of the child existed. As she left, Alma spotted tracks in the mud, narrow grooves, too precise for animal paws. They led into the woods, flanked by tiny footprints. Baby shoes. She followed until the trees tightened, suffocating the light. Ahead, a rusted pram sat abandoned, its mattress stained brown. A voice hummed from the darkness, a lullaby chapter. The Red Moon's Lullaby. The lullaby swelled a warped rendition of Rockabye Baby as Alma inched toward the pram. Its hood trembled. She aimed her gun, sweat slick on the grip. A shadow lunged. Not Vera. A child. No, a thing with a toddler's hunched body and a face like melted wax, its jaw unhinging to release a gurgling wail. Alma fired. The bullet tore through its chest, spraying black sludge. It collapsed, twitching, as the forest erupted with shrieks. Back at the station, forensic biologist Luis Rodriguez grimaced at the sludge sample. Not human. Not animal. Some kind of hybrid tissue. Stem cells fused with plant matter. He zoomed in on the microscope screen. Tendrils of chlorophyll snaked through corrupted DNA. Alma's throat tightened. They're making familiars. Guardians for the ritual site. Father and Rick discovered the pattern at A.M. Clara's journal cited lunar cycles tied to specific infants. The red moon craves those born under Scorpio's venom. Cross-referencing birth records, Alma found 12 children, each born in November, each with a parent suffering a terminal illness. They're not just sacrificial lambs, and Rick said. They're medicine. The next letter arrived in Alma's mailbox. No postmark. Just 2 words in jagged script. Welcome, Gardner. Inside lay a dried nightshade blossom and a Polaroid of Gobby's grave. On the back, a scrawl. The unborn needs a sister. Alma vomited in the driveway, her knees sinking into frost-hardened earth. Sombraluna's chapel bells rang at midnight, though the church had been abandoned for weeks. Alma and Rick found Vera there, flanked by 6 robed figures. They chanted in Latin, circling a stone basin filled with mercury. Above them hung a mobile of preserved infant hands, their tiny fingers pointing to a mural, a moon devouring a child. Vera turned, her nurse's cap askew. You're late, detective. The gardener's tools need sharpening. Alma's flashlight trembled. Vera's face was a patchwork of skin grafts, her left eye milky, but her right vibrant green. Gobby's eye. The same shade as Alma's daughter. Harvested it myself, Vera smirked, tapping her socket. A mother's grief is excellent fertilizer. The cultists lunged, and Rick swung a rusted candelabrum, buying Alma seconds to fire. 2 robed bodies fell, their hoods slipping to reveal faces Alma recognized parents of the missing. They escaped with a looted hymnal. Its pages detailed the moon's baptism, drowning a 12th infant in quicksilver during the eclipse. A diagram showed a woman, Vera, impaling a cradle on a thorned tree. And Rick translated the footnote. The unborn becomes the reborn, and death shall suckle at life's teat. Alma's phone buzzed. A text from Vera. Cradle is ready. Say goodbye to Sophia's boy. Sofia Martinez's farmhouse was silent. Too silent. Alma kicked in the door to find the teenage mother catatonic in a rocking chair, her arms cradling empty air. A navy ribbon hung from the ceiling fan, swaying. On the floor, a trail of mercury droplets led to the nursery. Alma followed, dreading what she'd find. The crib overflowed with wilted roses. Beneath them lay a doll with Sophia's features, its stomach split open. Nestled inside, a still-beating heart connected by wire to a car battery. And Rick gagged. It's a homunculus core. Sustained by her grief. Alma lifted the doll. Its voice box croaked in Sophia's voice. They took him to the ice tree. The forest's heart held the ice tree, a towering pine glazed in frozen mercury, its branches sagging with dolls and vials. Vera stood beneath it, cradling Sophia's shrieking newborn. The red moon loomed overhead, its edge nibbled by eclipse. 12 cradles purified, Vera hissed. 12 sins cleansed. My child will live, and this cursed town will finally. Alma's bullet tore through Vera's shoulder. The baby slipped, falling toward the mercury pool. And Rick dove, catching the infant as Vera screamed. The cultists emerged from the trees, their chants rising. Alma fired again, but the eclipse reached totality. The mercury ignited, blue flames engulfing the ice tree. Vera laughed, her flesh bubbling. Too late. The unborn is already here. The pool stirred. A small hand breached the surface porcelain pail, veined with silver. Then another. A child's face emerged, beautiful and grotesque, its eyes twin eclipses. It opened its mouth. The scream wasn't a scream. It was Gobby's voice. "Mommy?" Alma's gun clattered to the ground. Chapter: The Unborn's Feast. The thing wearing Gobby's voice climbed from the mercury pool, its limbs elongating like molten wax. Moonlight warped around its form, casting no shadow. Alma's breath hitched. "Gabby." The unborn tilted its head, black tears carving paths down its silvered cheeks. "You let me die," it cooed, stepping onto the frozen earth. The ice cracked beneath its touch, blooming with blackened flowers. Father and Rick clutched Sophia's squalling newborn, backing toward the tree line. "Alma, it's not her. It's a thing wearing her voice." The unborn laughed a sound like breaking glass and lunged. Alma stumbled, firing blindly. The bullet punched through its chest, leaving a hole that sealed instantly. Vera writhed on the ground, her burnt hands clawing at the unborn's ankles. "Mateo! Mijo!" she shrieked. The unborn paused, studying Vera. "Not Mama," it hissed. With a flick of its wrist, Vera's neck snapped. The corpse slumped, her remaining eye plucked out and swallowed by the creature. Alma recoiled as it turned, Gobby's face reforming. "Now you," it purred, mercury pooling in its palms. "Mama's finally here." The ground trembled. Alma's flashlight illuminated the ice tree's roots. They pulsed like veins, pumping black fluid into the earth. She remembered Clara's journal, "The garden feeds." The unborn wasn't the end. The roots were spreading, infecting. Father Andrick's voice cut through the haze. "The heart. Destroy its heart." Alma dodged the unborn swipe, rolling toward the tree. Its trunk had split open, revealing a hollow core where a tiny lead heart throbbed. Sophia's doll had mentioned the ice tree. Sustained by her grief, Alma gripped her knife. Behind her, the unborn screeched, "Don't you want me back?" Its voice split Gobby's, then Vera's, then a chorus of the missing children. The heart pulsed faster as Alma stabbed. Black sludge geysered, scalding her hands. The unborn wailed, its form unraveling. "You hate me." Gobby's voice sobbed. Alma's vision blurred memories of hospital corridors, her daughter's last breath, the guilt of turning off life support. The knife slipped. The heart beat on. Father Andrick's prayer boomed suddenly, Latin verses sharp as blades. The unborn recoiled, smoke curling from its skin. He thrust the newborn into Alma's arms. "Finish it. The tree thrives on your grief, not the child's." The infant's cries sliced through the unborn's wails. Alma stabbed again, twisting the blade. The heart exploded. The ice tree shattered, raining daggers of frozen mercury. The unborn howled, collapsing into a puddle of liquid metal. Alma shielded the baby as shards impaled the ground around them. When the storm cleared, the forest was silent. The pool lay still. Dawn bled through the pines as paramedics pried Sophia's baby from Alma's arms. Her hands, burnt and blistered, wouldn't unclench. Father and Rick crouched beside her. Vera's followers are dead. The roots, they retracted. "It's over." Alma stared at the spot where the unborn fell. A single navy ribbon fluttered in the mud. Weeks later, Alma stood at Gobby's grave. No shadows coiled in the grass. No whispers. Just wind. She placed a sunflower on the headstone, Gobby's favorite, and turned to leave. A glint caught her eye, a doll peeking from behind a nearby oak, its button eyes gleaming. Alma lunged, but it vanished, leaving only the smell of cloves. The town declared Vera claimed a rogue nurse driven mad by stillbirth. They burned Clara Vole's garden, salted the earth. Parents mourned, doctors shrugged, and the headlines faded. But in the hospital attic, the vials remained. Forgotten. Waiting. That winter, Alma woke to singing. A lullaby, drifting from her closet. Inside, she found a tiny lead heart, warm and beating. Etched into its surface. Cradle. Outside her window, the red moon hung low, its cratered face smiling. Somewhere in the pines, A cradle creaked. Whisper of the drowned sirens. The curse of the faceless lighthouse chapter, the first wave. The storm had carved its fury into the walls of Saltspire Cove, leaving the air thick with the stench of rotting kelp and iron. Beneath the jagged arch of the crimson algae cave, the first victim lay half-submerged in a tide pool, his body contorted as if mid-transformation. Valeria Rojas, forensic podiatrist, crouched beside the corpse, her latex gloves slick with brine. The man's legs were a grotesque mosaic, skin peeled back from the thighs down, muscle fibers splayed like seaweed, and his feet crudely sutured with fishing net threads that glowed faintly, as though stitched with moonlight. "His identity's obvious," muttered Darius Voss, the meteorologist, his voice competing with the howl of wind outside the cave. He gestured to the tattoo on the victim's forearm, a mermaid coiled around an anchor. Ephraim Harlow. Missing 3 days. Best crabber in Pueblo Salabra. Till now. Valeria ignored him, her focus locked on the scales. Dozens had been carved into the man's calves, precise as surgical incisions, their edges crusted with salt. Embedded within them were tiny periwinkle shells, their spiral patterns mirroring the whirlpools in Darius storm charts. Valeria's flashlight trembled as she traced the tail of nets and bioluminescent algae. "This isn't post-mortem mutilation," she said. "The sutures. They were done while he was still alive. See how the skin's puckered?" he thrashed. Her voice faltered. A podiatrist knew feet how they twisted in pain, how they arched in terror. These feet had danced a final, agonized jig. Darius knelt beside her, eyeing the cave's ceiling. Water dripped from stalactites, each drop echoing like a metronome. "Tides have been erratic since last month's eclipse," he said. "But this smells like folklore." He pulled a flask from his coat. "Whiskey or holy water?" Valeria didn't ask. The town's paranoia had seeped into her too. Sailors whispering about the weeping ones at the bar, old women hanging dried squid above doorways. As Valeria photographed the wounds, her camera flash ignited a hidden detail. Symbols etched into the cave wall, invisible in dim light. They resembled braided seaweed, or maybe nooses. Darius traced one with his finger. "Lunar script," he muttered. "Used by th-century lighthouse keepers to predict rogue waves. My grandfather called it the alphabet of drowned men." Suddenly, the corpse's jaw creaked open. A blackened tongue lolled out, followed by a rush of seawater and 2 porcelain white moon snails. They clattered onto the rocks, their opercula spinning like tiny wheels. Valeria recoiled. "They're in the eyes too," she breathed. "The sockets, packed with them. Like plugs." Darius pocketed a snail, his face grim. "Salesmen say these carry the voices of the dead. If you hold them to your ear," a wave exploded against the cave mouth, dousing them in spray. Valeria's notes floated away, ink bleeding into the tide pool. As Darius lunged to grab them, his lantern light swept over the corpse's hips. Beneath the shredded flesh, the pelvic bone gleamed scraped clean, polished. Carved into it was a single word: shelter. "We need to leave," Darius said. "Tide's turning." Valeria didn't argue. Pueblo Salabra's waters obeyed no schedule, devouring the reckless. As they retreated, her boot dislodged a rock. Underneath lay a glass bottle, its neck sealed with wax. Inside, a lock of hair floated jet black, tied with a red ribbon. Darius smashed the bottle against the wall. "Don't," Valeria warned, too late. The ribbon slithered into a crack, vanishing as if sucked downward. Outside, the sky was a festering bruise. Valeria turned for one last look at the cave. For a heartbeat, the sutures on Ephraim's legs pulsed brighter, casting emerald shadows that squirmed like eels. Then darkness reclaimed him. "You felt it too, didn't you?" Darius lit a cigarette, his hands steady. Like something was breathing in there. Not him. Something older. Back in town, Valeria scrubbed her hands raw, but the brine lingered. That night, she dreamt of feet not Ephraim's, but a child's, small and blue-veined, running across wet sand. In the dream, she followed the footprints until they vanished at the tide line. When she woke, her pillow reeked of rotting shellfish, and her window was streaked with salt, as though the sea had clawed its way up the glass, whispering a secret only the drowned could translate. Chapter: The alphabet of the tides. The storm had gnawed at Pueblo Salabra for 9 days. Darius pinned his tidal charts to the rust-eaten wall of the abandoned lighthouse, now their makeshift lab. Red strings connected dates of disappearances, blood moon phases, and garble from fishermen's logbooks. Valeria stared at the pattern. Every victim had vanished during a tidal suicide, when waves reversed their flow and dragged debris out to sea. "It's a timetable," Darius said. "Next abductions in hours. During the black perigee, when the moon's closest and the ocean hungriest." Valeria spread crime scene photos across a worm-eaten desk. The symbols from the cave carved into rock, not by tools, but by something serrated. Claws, teeth. She dripped UV-reactive solution onto a rubbing, and the lines ignited, jagged glyphs resembling hanged men, tide swallowing cities, and a spiral devouring its own tail. "It's not an alphabet," she said. "It's a recipe." Darius glanced up. "For what?" Valeria's finger hovered over a glyph of a mermaid cradling a human heart. "Immortality. Or revenge." At midnight, they returned to the cave. With UV lamps, the walls bled secrets. The same symbols glowed blue where victims' blood had been smeared. "They're markers," Darius realized. "Like a trail." The symbols led deeper into the cave, where the air reeked of copper and wet rot. Valeria's boot kicked a glass jar, one of dozens hidden in crevices. Each held a fingerbone tagged with a name. "Missing sailors," Darius read. "From the S." "How is this possible?" a splash echoed. Something slithered into the water. Darius aimed his lamp at the tide pool. Below the surface, a statue of a headless mermaid lay on its side, seaweed hair drifting around a plaque. "The faceless lighthouse guides the drowned." Valeria's light caught movement, a shadow darting behind rocks. "We're not alone," she hissed. Darius grabbed a rusted harpoon from the debris. "If it's the killer, he's been watching us. Learning." Footsteps echoed, bare feet slapping wet stone. Valeria glimpsed a figure, a young man's silhouette, shirtless, skin etched with self-inflicted tide tattoos. He vanished into a tunnel. They chased him, their lamps painting the walls in frantic strokes. The tunnel opened into a grotto where stalactites dripped black fluid. In the center stood an altar of coral and human ribs. On it lay a wooden box, its lid inlaid with a shipwheel design. Inside, a fingerless glove stitched with kelp, holding a zombie snail, a creature parasitized by mind-controlling microbes. "It's a gift," Darius said. "He wants us to see." Valeria noted the glove's size, too small for a man. "A child's?" The snail stirred, its eye stalks swiveling toward her. Darius crushed it underfoot. "Don't play his game." But Valeria was already deciphering the box's carvings. Waves cradling a lighthouse, its beacon replaced by a screaming mouth. Beneath it, words in Latin. "The flesh is a shipwreck, the soul a lighthouse." Back at town, Valeria dissected the glove. Between the threads, she found strands of albino hair and a sliver of nautilus shell engraved with coordinates. Darius cross-referenced them with his charts. "It's the hollow spire, a sea column that only surfaces during storms. Old wives say it's a chimney for hell." Valeria's phone buzzed an anonymous text. A photo of her motel window, taken minutes prior. Attached, audio of distorted whale song. When she played it backward, a girl's voice whispered, "He'll make me pretty again." That night, Darius hacked into maritime archives. In a schooner vanished near Hollow Spire. Sole survivor, a year-old boy found clinging to a buoy. The report noted scratches on his legs resembling scale patterns, and his claim, "The mermaids sang Daddy away." The boy's name? Juan Merrick. Valeria froze. The orphanage fire in records burned. But one kid's file survived. 1. Diagnosed with aquatic hysteria. Rain battered the lighthouse. Darius overlaid lunar maps with the killer's schedule. He's not just following the tides, he's creating them. He pointed to a formula. Low-frequency sound waves could agitate water, conjure rogue swells. And the best machine to generate that frequency? A lighthouse horn. Valeria recalled the broken mechanism upstairs. But this lighthouse hasn't worked in decades. A deafening BWOM shook the walls. The horn blared, its pitch vibrating their teeth. Outside, the tides began to boil. They sprinted upstairs. The horn's control panel had been jury-rigged car batteries, copper wire, and a gramophone playing a warped vinyl. Valeria yanked the needle. Silence fell, but Ocean's wrath didn't. Through cracked windows, they watched waves claw at the town. Among the rooftops, a figure stood atop the church steeple Juan, arms raised like a conductor. Darius zoomed his camera. Around Juan's neck hung 7 shark teeth, each strung with a lock of hair. "He's not done," Valeria whispered. In the dark, her UV lamp caught graffiti on the wall, a fresh symbol. This one showed a lighthouse crumbling, and a mermaid rising. Chapter, the chorus of the drowned. The drowned woman washed ashore at dawn, her lungs filled with brine and ballads. Mira Torres, a lobsterman's widow, had vanished during the Black Perigee. Now, she sprawled on the docks, her throat bloated like a jellyfish sack. Valeria crouched beside her, tonguing the word survivor like a lie. Myra's legs were intact, no scales, no sutures, but her fingernails had been replaced with limpet shells, glued with a sticky black resin that reeked of low tide. "She's breathing," Darius said, quieter than the gulls circling overhead. Valeria pressed her stethoscope to Myra's chest. The heartbeat was arrhythmic, a stuttering Morse code. But beneath it, another sound, gurgling harmonies, as if a choir sang through her ribs. Valeria recoiled. "Get her to the clinic. Now." In the sterile glare of the exam room, Myra's condition defied logic. Her pupils had dilated to oily pools, reflecting nothing. When prodded, she hissed in a language neither Valeria nor the nurses recognized, guttural, punctuated by clicks. But the horror lay in her voice box. An X-ray revealed foreign objects lodged in her trachea, shark teeth, arranged like a comb's bristles. "They're vibrating," the radiologist said. "Every time she breathes." Darius played the audio from his storm-chasing hydrophone. At first, Valeria heard only whale calls. Then, a distortion voices beneath the bass, human but warped. A child's laughter spliced with choking. A woman humming a lullaby. A man chanting, "Cut the threads, cut the threads." Myra's monitor spiked. She thrashed, screaming, "Los Lagrimas. La Novia Roba Almas." Her hand clamped Valeria's wrist, cold as abyssal clay. Valeria pried herself free. Myra's grip left a bruise shaped like a starfish. "The tears. The bride steals souls," she translated, shaky. Darius replayed the audio, isolating the chant. Slowing it down, the words crystallized. 7 keys for 7 locks, the lighthouse weeps as the bride knocks. Valeria's starfish bruise pulsed in sync with the rhythm. That night, they dove into Myra's past. Her husband's trawler had sunk in, blamed on faulty sonar. But Valeria unearthed a police report. 2 weeks before his death, he'd raided a museum ship, stealing a brass diving helmet. He claimed it called to him, the report noted. The helmet was found empty on a beach, its interior coated in a pink biofilm that dissolved in sunlight. Mira died at .m, her final breath a shanty. "Bury me where the tide can't chew." During autopsy, Valeria found her vocal cords coated with bioluminescent diatoms. They glowed faintly as Darius played the hydrophone recording. "It's a duet," he realized. The diatoms pulsed in time with the audio, as if singing back. They traced the diatoms to Gulch, a submarine sinkhole where the seabed dropped into a void. Local divers refused to go near it, muttering about eels with human teeth. Darius rigged a drone with UV lights and dropped it into the abyss. The feed showed carcasses, dogs, deer, a graffitied speedboat. Then, movement a figure in a tattered wetsuit, harvesting something from the walls. The drone zoomed in, hair, rooted in the rock like lichen. "That's impossible," Valeria said. "Human hair doesn't grow underwater." The figure turned. The wetsuit's hood framed Luan's gaunt face, his eyes milk white. He smiled, plucked a strand of hair, and tucked it into a pouch labeled, "For her." The feed cut as a tentacle, or was it a braid? Smashed the drone. They regrouped at the lighthouse, adrenaline sour on their tongues. Darius cross-referenced Gulch's location with Luan's childhood. He used to scavenge here as a teen. For food or offerings. Valeria studied Myra's limpet nails under a microscope. The resin was shipworm glue, a rare secretion locals use to seal hulls. But the DNA mixed in it matched no known species, only alignment with sea slugs. At midnight, Valeria woke to sobs outside her motel. She cracked the blinds. On the beach, a procession of figures trudged into the surf sleepwalkers, their pajamas soaked. At the front was a girl in a nightgown, her feet bloodied, leading them like a siren's apprentice. Valeria shouted, but the sleepwalkers didn't turn. As the girl reached deeper water, moonlight caught her face. She had Myra's nose, Luan's jawline, and the hollow eyes of the autistic child from his past. Valeria charged into the surf, waves clawing her knees. The girl dissolved into foam, leaving behind a rag doll hand-sewn from fishing nets, stuffed with kelp, its button eyes replaced with periwinkle snails. Pinned to its chest was a note in tide-stained ink. "You hear her too. Don't lie. She's in your shoes now." Valeria glanced down. Her boots teemed with chapter, the bride's threshold. Valeria's boots squelched with zombie snails, their shells pulsing like diseased hearts. She stumbled back to the lighthouse, where Darius dissected the rag doll. Its kelp stuffing writhed with parasitic worms, each etched with microscales. "They're larvae," he said. "Stage 2 of the host cycle. Stage 3. Probably us." Valeria burned her boots in an oil drum, the smoke reeking of burnt hair. The town's church bells began ringing at noon, not the pastor's doing. They tolled in discordant triplets, a code sailors once used to warn of leviathans. Father Tomas was found in the belfry, his throat crammed with glass fishing floats. Autopsy revealed his vocal cords replaced by knotted kelp. Valeria photographed the body. On his chest, a symbol carved in barnacles script a mermaid with a keyhole belly. Darius decoded the town's tidal logs. The black perige's not just a moon phase. It's a door. He showed Valeria a journal entry. A drunk lighthouse keeper wrote of a wet bride who rose during solar eclipses, demanding grooms. Those who refused were found with their feet scalded black. Luan's not creating rituals, he's reenacting them. He thinks he's wedding her. They traced Father Tomas' floats to a derelict trawler, the Mariana's Smile, half sunk in a cove. Valeria dove into the cabin, her flashlight dimmed by murk. In the captain's quarters, a shrine. Dried seahorses hung in wedding veils, shark jaws clasping human ribs, and Polaroids of Luan as a child, his legs scarred with crude mermaid fins. Beneath the photos, a diary entry. "She promised to fix me. All I had to give was the crying ones." As Valeria surfaced, the trawler groaned. Something snagged her ankle, a mannequin hand, its fingers made of coral bone. She kicked free, breaching as the ship collapsed into the depths. Darius hauled her onto the rocks. "You're bleeding," he said. Valeria glanced at her calf. 3 parallel gashes, oozing iridescent pus. "Not blood," she whispered. "Sewage." By nightfall, Valeria's wound sprouted seaweed follicles. Darius sterilized a knife with whiskey. "This'll hurt." She didn't scream as he cut, but the follicles regrew within minutes. "It's a marker," she said. "The bride knows I'm close." Darius sprayed the wound with liquid nitrogen. The follicles blackened but pulsed defiantly. They broke into Juan's childhood orphanage. Dust and mildew choked the air. In the attic, they found a crib circled by shark vertebrae, its mattress stained with birthing fluids. A ledger listed adoptions, all children born during eclipses. Valeria froze at one entry, Elena Rojas. Adopted status, drowned. Her sister's name. The sister who'd vanished during a beach picnic when Valeria was 7. Shaking, Valeria opened Elena's file. A photo fell out. Her sister, age 5, sitting on a stranger's lap, a young Juan, grinning as he braided her hair with anglerfish spines. The caseworker's note: subject exhibits abnormal bond with tidal patterns. Claims a lady in the waves sings him lullabies. Valeria's fingertips left sweat smudges on the paper. He knew her. He took her. Darius found a brine-preserved fetus in the orphanage's well, umbilical cord intact, its skin translucent as jellyfish. Genetic tests matched Valeria's DNA. Her niece. Stillborn or sacrificed. He's been waiting for you, Darius said. This is his dowry to the bride. But he needs you as witness. They returned to the lighthouse at low tide. The walls now bled salt water, and the horn blared again, this time, a distorted wedding march. On the control panel, Juan had left a wedding invitation inked on hagfish skin. Join us at the threshold. Bring the child. Valeria hurled it into the sea. It washed ashore minutes later, dry and warm. At dawn, hypothermia set in. Valeria's teeth chattered despite the heat. Darius wrapped her in a survival blanket, but her breath frosted the air. It's starting, he said. Valeria's reflection in the lighthouse lens showed a corpse-pale face, her eyes bleeding bioluminescent fluid. She hacked up a clump of worms, their bodies coiled around a pearl. Etched on it, I do. The storm hit at midnight. Valeria staggered to the cliff's edge as the town flooded. Below, a stone archway emerged from the waves, draped in rotting bridal lace. Through it, Valeria saw Juan standing on a shore of human teeth, holding the hand of a silhouette with too many joints. The bride. Her veil billowed not fabric, but living plankton, each organism whispering Valeria's name. Juan raised Elena's rag doll, its button eyes now Valeria's stolen wedding ring. She's ready, he screamed. The ocean answered as the moon went black. Chapter, the lighthouse keeper's lullaby. Valeria's skin had begun to shed, peeling in translucent sheets that smelled of low tide. She hid the condition from Darius, bandaging her arms with fishnet gauze. Pueblo Salabra's streets lay abandoned, save for feral dogs gnawing on bioluminescent jellyfish that washed ashore. The town's clock tower chimed times at midnight, its hands bent into the shape of a ship's wheel. Darius found Valeria inside the post office, scrubbing symbols off the walls, the same lunar script from the cave, now scrawled in squid ink. It's spreading faster than we thought, he said, holding up a Geiger counter. Radiation spiked wherever symbols appeared, not nuclear, but something older, seeping from the seabed. Valeria coughed into her hand. Her phlegm swirled with planktonic parasites, their tails thrashing. The bride's getting impatient. Juan's ritual isn't pure enough. That's why he needs me. The last witness. They followed the symbols to the abandoned observatory, its dome cracked like an egg. Inside, star charts mapped not constellations, but drowned cities. A reel-to-reel recorder played a loop, a woman screaming in reverse. Darius rewired it. Played forward, it became a lullaby. Valeria recognized the melody. Her mother sang it after Elena vanished. He's been inside our heads for decades, she whispered. In the basement, they found a glass coffin filled with brine. Floating inside, a mummified infant wrapped in seaweed, its mouth sewn shut with fishing line. Darius cross-referenced the coffin's carvings with his tidal charts. Black perigee peaks tonight. The bride's threshold will be fully open. But Juan needs a lifeline, you, to tether her to this world. Valeria pressed her palm to the glass. The infant's eyes snapped open, irises matching hers. The lighthouse horn blared again, but not from the tower from offshore. They raced to the cliffs. A mile out, a phantom lighthouse shimmered atop the waves, its beam blood-red. Darius checked historical logs. That's the Grief's respite. Sunken crew vanished except the keeper, who, quote, melted into the lantern room. Valeria's wound pulsed. Her seaweed follicles had sprouted barnacles, each whispering when touched. At dusk, Valeria collapsed, seizing. Darius carried her to the clinic, but the staff had fled. Her fever hit F. She vomited brine and a child's molar engraved with coordinates. Hollow spire, but deeper, Darius realized. He injected her with antifungals, steroids, nothing stuck. We need Luan. He's the only one who knows how to stop this. Valeria grabbed his collar. Or how to finish it. Midnight. The clinic's power died. Shadows pooled like oil. Valeria rose, guided by the barnacle's voices, and walked into the sea. Darius tackled her in the surf. Fight it. She kicked, strength inhuman. She's not hurting me, Valeria snarled. She's fixing my sadness. Her pupils split vertically shark-like. They reached the hollow spire at high tide. The sea column loomed, its limestone pocked with skeletal handprints. At its peak, a grotto glowed green. Inside, Luan awaited, barefoot on a bed of sea urchin spines. His chest bore a fresh tattoo. Valeria's face merged with the bride's. Sister, he grinned. She's been so lonely. Luan hurled a shark-toothed dagger. It missed Valeria, embedding in the wall. The grotto shuddered. Ancient machinery awoke, gears forged from whalebone, pulleys of braided kelp. The first lighthouse, Luan said, built to ward her off. But they failed. So we'll make a better one. Flesh and bone. You'll be the lantern keeper. Darius charged Luan, but the urchin spines coiled around his legs, burrowing into muscle. Valeria lunged for the dagger. Luan caught her wrist. You've seen her. Her songs in your marrow. We'll be a family again. Valeria headbutted him. His nose crunched, spilling black sludge that hissed like dry ice. She stabbed the dagger into the grotto's floor. The machinery screamed. The hollow spire cracked, seawater geysering through fissures. Luan wailed, clawing at Valeria as barnacles engulfed his limbs. She'll never forgive you, he shrieked. Valeria spat blood. I don't need forgiveness. Just a sister. The dagger twisted and the grotto detonated. Valeria awoke on a beach, the dawn sky streaked with ectoplasmic auroras. Darius knelt beside her, his legs mangled by spines. The hollow spire was gone, sunk beneath a whirlpool. Valeria's barnacles had retreated, leaving scars shaped like tidal equations. In her clenched fist, Elena's molar, now a pearl. Darius pointed to the horizon. A figure walked on water. Luan, reborn, flanked by children made of seafoam. Behind them, the phantom lighthouse burned, its beacon now Valeria's face. Chapter, the flesh beacon. Valeria's scars itched with the tides. The tidal equations carved into her skin by the hollow spire's collapse glowed faintly at dawn, as if calculating the next catastrophe. Darius, limping on legs still leaking urchin venom, found her dissecting a seafoam child's corpse on the clinic floor. Its body dissolved into salt water when touched, leaving only a human tongue studded with pearls. She's evolving them, Valeria said, making them more durable. The townspeople vanished in clusters. Abandoned homes reeked of rotten coral and cloying brine. Valeria tracked residue to the old cannery, its rusted vats now birthing pools. Inside, walls pulsed with veiny membranes. Floors sagged under the weight of flesh bricks, compressed limbs, and organs mortared with calcified algae. He's building upward, Darius said. Just like the lighthouse. But faster. At dusk, Valeria hacked into her own DNA sequencer. Her genome now included abyssal tubeworm markers, coding for bioluminescent blood cells. Darius found her wrist deep in a microscope, comparing slides of her blood to samples from the bride's threshold. "Your white cells are attacking pathogens that don't exist," he said. Valeria didn't look up. "They exist. Just not here yet." They intercepted a radio transmission from Juan's Phantom Lighthouse, an SOS loop in Morse code. Decrypted, it read, "Bride needs a heart. Valeria, come home." Darius sabotaged Valeria's boat, forcing her inland. They hiked cracked highways lined with dead seabirds, their beaks stuffed with human hair. Valeria's scars flared with every step, guiding her toward the coast. At Broken Tide Asylum, a derelict sanitarium rumored to house Juan's first victims, they found walls papered with Valeria's childhood photos. A padded cell contained a wax figure of her mother, its eyes leaking black tears. Inside its chest cavity, a working tape recorder. Valeria pressed play. Her mother's voice sobbed, "I tried to drown her, but she wouldn't take Elena. She wanted you." Valeria collapsed, clawing at her ears as the asylum's PA system crackled to life. The bride's song vibrated through the walls, a frequency that liquefied glass and boiled paint. Darius dragged her outside as the building imploded. "He's weaponizing your grief," he shouted. Valeria retched a live octopus, its tentacles branded with Elena's initials, before whispering, "She's weaponizing hope." They camped in a storm drain, Darius suturing Valeria's self-inflicted claw marks. Moonlight revealed graffiti beneath the grime. "Drown the witness." A map followed, leading to a sewer outlet where albino alligators writhed in oil-slick water. Valeria waded in, her bioluminescent blood repelling the creatures. At the tunnel's end, a door marked "Archives" pulsed like a heart. Inside, waterlogged ledgers detailed Pueblo Salabra's founding. In Settlers executed a woman named Maris Stella IV, consorting with leviathans. Her last words, "I'll marry the drowned and birth a nation." Valeria found Maris's mummified hand in a jar, webbed and clawed. Its fingerprint matched the bride's threshold carvings. "She wasn't a myth," Darius said. "She was a cult leader." Valeria sliced her palm, pressing it to the hand. Visions erupted. Maris strapped to a keel, drowned to summon something older. The sea answered, not a monster, but an inversion, swallowing the coastline. Survivors worshipped the void, breeding children who dreamed in sonar. Valeria ripped away, her blood boiling. Juan's not the groom. He's the sacrifice. GPS coordinates led them to a submerged church steeple. Diving in silt-choked water, Valeria found the bell tower crammed with pregnancy test wands, all positive, floating in jars of amniotic fluid. A mural depicted the bride cradling a lighthouse made of fused skeletons. Valeria's scars burned. She surfaced, convulsing, as Darius dragged her ashore. "There's a heartbeat," she gasped. "Inside the beacon." They commandeered a fishing trawler, motors roaring toward the Phantom Lighthouse. Its beam seared the sky. Now Valeria's face twisted into a rictus scream. The ocean heaved with conjoined twins, Juan's seafoam children grafted to dolphin carcasses. Valeria leaped onto the lighthouse's rusted ladder, climbing as the structure bled from every rivet. At the lantern room, Juan awaited, his torso split open to reveal a bioluminescent womb. Inside floated a fetus with Valeria's eyes and Maris Stella's claws. "Our daughter," he crooned. "The first of the new tides." Valeria lunged with a harpoon gun. The shot pierced the womb, but the fetus grabbed the shaft, pulling Valeria closer. Below, Darius screamed as the trawler capsized, the beacon's roots rising 1,000 skeletal arms hungry for a keeper chapter. The keeper's cry, Valeria's veins throbbed with sentient kelp, its roots threading through her marrow. Trapped in the beacon's core, she clawed at the wall's fused vertebrae of drowned sailors as Maristella's skeletal hands stitched themselves to her spine. The fetus, now fully formed and chittering in cetacean clicks, perched on her shoulder. "She wants you to sing," Juan whispered through the walls. Valeria's vocal cords spasmed, emitting a subsonic whine that cracked the lantern glass. Darius fought through the storm, his stolen trawler capsized, now clinging to a buoy lashed with severed eel heads. The beacon's roots encircled him, skeletal fingers plucking at his wounds. Below, the sea erupted. Townsfolk turned hybrids surged forth, their limbs grafted with crustacean exoskeletons. Darius jabbed a flare gun into one's mouth. The burst lit the water, revealing a school of coelacanth, each fish branded with Valeria's initials. Inside the beacon, Valeria discovered Maristella's ossified heart, carved into its chambers, a hymn to the unseen groom, an entity older than the bride. The lyrics matched Elena's lullabies. Valeria's scars burned as she sang a verse. The beacon shuddered. Rust bled upward, transforming into barnacle script, "Break the heart, break the chain." The fetus hissed, clawing at Valeria's throat. Darius scaled the beacon's roots, now brittle from Valeria's song. He found Juan in a turbine chamber, feeding ghost shrimp into a reactor of rotting whale brain. "You're too late," Juan grinned, his teeth replaced with lighthouse lens shards. "The unseen arrives at dawn." Darius swung a pipe wrench. Juan's jaw shattered, but he laughed, spitting phosphorescent mucus that burned through steel. Valeria pried Maris's heart from its coral cradle. It pulsed with blacklight algae, cycling through memories. Maris drowning her children to feed the groom, Juan as a boy digging up her relics, Elena's tiny hand reaching into tidal pools. The fetus lunged, but Valeria smashed the heart. The beacon screamed. Walls dissolved into planktonic mist, revealing Pueblo Salabra's coastline now miles inland, swallowed by the rising abyss. Darius found Valeria on the beacon's crumbled remains, her legs fused into a serpentine tail. The fetus lay dormant, wrapped in fishing net like a stillborn chrysalis. "The groom's coming," she rasped. "Maris sold us all. The bride was just bait." Her tail lashed, demolishing a fuel tank. Flames danced across the oil-slick waves, forming a map, the real lighthouse, key to resealing the abyss. In town, saltwater geysers erupted, vomiting up calcified infants' failed brides, petrified mid-wedding. Valeria slithered through debris, her tail shedding scales that hatched into sea spider swarms. Darius deciphered the fire map. The original lighthouse's foundation hid Maris's crypt. "We need her bones," he said. Valeria stared at the fetus. "And we need it. It's the only thing the groom fears." They breached the lighthouse basement, its door sealed with amulet shrapnel and cobwebbed chains. Inside, Maris's coffin pulsed like a jellyfish. Valeria pried it open. The skeleton inside wore Elena's childhood necklace. "She took her," Valeria whispered. "Not Luan." "Maris." The fetus awoke, shrieking. Its cries shook loose brick dust that coalesced into a holographic will-o-wisp Elena's ghost, beckoning toward the lantern room. Darius rigged the lighthouse lamp with uranium stolen from the trawler. Valeria draped Maris's bones over the lens, her tail coiled around the gearshift. The fetus clung to Elena's ghost, its teeth buried in her spectral neck. "Now!" Darius yelled. Valeria cranked the lamp. The beam ignited Maris's bones, projecting a countersong into the abyss. The groom roared. The sea split. A maw wider than cities yawned, lined with liquid crystal teeth. The groom's true form a gravitational anomaly, hungry for brides. Valeria hurled the fetus into the beam. It combusted, screaming in Elena's voice. The groom recoiled. Juan, half melted into the beacon's wreckage, wailed, "You killed our blood." Valeria seized his jaw. "We're not blood. We're carrion." She fed him to the lamp. The beam flickered. Pueblo Salabra trembled as the abyss closed, saltwater retreating. Valeria collapsed, human legs regrown but marred by kelp tattoos. Darius cradled her, but his hands came away sticky with primordial ooze from her pores. Elena's ghost faded, mouthing, "She's still inside you." Dawn revealed a bone-dry harbor. Valeria stood at the lighthouse threshold, now pregnant with something that hummed. Darius aimed a tranquilizer rifle at her. "You're incubating the groom's heir," he said. Valeria smiled, black tears eroding her cheeks. "No. I gave him a new bride." She dove into the cracked seabed as Darius's shot missed. Distant aftershocks rumbled, a beacon reigniting. Deep below, chapter, the widow's tide, Valeria walked the seabed, her lungs filled with hydra embryos, each heartbeat spawning new venom ducts. Above, ships burned. Sailors thrown overboard stared as she passed, their irises hardening into coral, their screams trapped in bubbles that burst into jellyfish blooms. Darius hunted her via submarine, sonar pings warped by the groom's echo. On his screens, Valeria appeared as a skeletal leviathan, ribs fused into a cathedral arch around her hybrid womb. Pueblo Salabra's survivors huddled in the lighthouse, now half swallowed by a living dune of mussel shells. They whispered Valeria's name like a hex, hanging shark fin charms to repel her influence. A girl drew sketches in squid ink, Valeria crowned with hagfish, straddling a throne of warship wreckage. The drawings pulsed wetly, leaking brine that pooled into a map. "She's calling us," the girl said. "To the cold wedding." Darius surfaced at a research buoy, its labs ransacked. Freezers held specimens, a still-beating heart grafted to a stingray, vials of Valeria's mucus-labeled primordial stem serum. A logged entry read, "Subject cells invert when exposed to lunar apnea. Hypothesize she's terraforming her biology to survive the abyssal honeymoon." He pocketed a syringe of congealed serum. It squirmed. Valeria carved a path through a thermal vent colony, its tube worms bowing as she neared. The groom's presence lingered, pressure cracks in reality, humming in the key of neutron stars. She pressed a hand to her womb, now bulging with symbiotic eels. "You fear him," she told them. The eels thrashed, spelling warnings in Morse code against her uterus. "Abandon host." Darius partnered with Lee, a marine mercenary whose arms were tattooed with anti-cosmic runes. Together, they dredged Valeria's childhood home from the silt. In the ruins, they found Elena's diary, pages preserved in whale oil. Entries detailed dreams of a man made of tides, offering Elena a crown of drowned roses. The last entry, "Val won't understand. I have to go where the moon is louder." Valeria breached at the Mariana Trench's edge, her skin sloughing to reveal a chitinous underlayer. The groom's song here was deafening, a bass line of collapsing stars. She vomited a siren's larynx, its vocal cords tuned to his frequency. When she sang, the trench split, spilling light from the planet's mantle. Shapes writhed, faceless grooms, each holding Valeria's rings. Lee injected Darius with the serum. His cells ignited, granting hours of hybrid resilience skills, retractable claws, echolocation. Side effects hit fast. His sweat attracted anglerfish swarms, and his dreams replayed Maristella's drowning on loop. "You'll die by dawn," Lee warned. Darius strapped on dive gear. So will she. Valeria descended the trench, guided by her eels. At its nadir lay the altar of annulments, a spire of asteroid rock riddled with fossilized grooms. She clawed open her womb, releasing the eels to chew through the altar. The groom roared. His true voice liquefied her eardrums, but Valeria regrew them using coral stem cells. "I'm not your bride," she hissed. "I'm your obituary." Darius and Lee ambushed her in a magma vent's glow. Lee fired a net gun weaved with monkfish sinew. Valeria dissolved it using bioacid spit, but Darius tackled her, syringing serum into her neck. Her mutations stuttered tail reversion, womb sealing. "It's not a cure," he pleaded. "But we can contain you." Valeria's jaw unhinged, engulfing his arm up to the shoulder. The serum backfired. Valeria's body temp spiked, boiling the water. Lee retreated as Darius's gills melted. Valeria coughed him up, her eyes refocusing. "You shouldn't have come." Darius, hemorrhaging, gripped her wrist. "You're still in there," he rasped. Valeria snapped his neck. The groom applauded via seismic laughter. Alone, Valeria reached the altar's core. The groom manifested as a micro-singularity, his event horizon adorned with wedding bands. Valeria fed him Lee's corpse, then herself every mutated cell a Trojan horse. The serum inside her mutated into antimatter yeast, expanding. The groom howled, compressing into a black pearl. Valeria's last thought, "Elena, I made it louder." The trench collapsed. Lee surfaced days later, mutated beyond recognition. Pueblo Salabra's survivors found him raving on a buoy. "She cracked the altar," he gibbered, pointing to the horizon. A new island rose, shaped like Valeria's skull. Its beaches bled, birthing amphibious infants who sang in Elena's voice. The lighthouse beacon flickered. Darius's body washed ashore, his lips sewn shut with Valeria's hair. Chapter, The Cosmic Vow. The island's infants matured in hours, their skin hardening into bioluminescent carapaces as their hive mind's whispers synced with tidal patterns. Lee, his body now a patchwork of anglerfish flesh and human bone, washed ashore at the skull-shaped island's weeping beaches. The infants surrounded him, clicking in unison as Darius's reanimated corpse emerged, coral tendrils suturing his split neck. His mouth unstitched itself, Valeria's hair snaking out to form words. "Bring her pearl to the altar." Lee trekked inland, avoiding pools of primordial amniotic fluid that reflected constellations not visible on Earth. The black pearl now fused to his sternum pulsed with Valeria's memories. Elena's laughter, Maristella's ritual chants, Darius's final breath. The hive mind assaulted him with visions, false sunrises, phantom weddings, but the pearl's hum kept him grounded. At the island's peak, a calcified throne of Valeria's vertebrae waited, crowned by a borehole into the cosmos. Lee activated salvaged submarine tech, rigging a sonic transmitter from the pearl's resonance. The infants retaliated, swarming him with beaks sharpened on volcanic glass. He fought using mutated limbs, secreting bioacid that melted their carapaces. But as the hive adapted, Lee's wound sprouted squid ink glands, side effects of prolonged pearl contact. Valeria's voice crackled through the transmitter. "They're using Darius to amplify his call. Destroy his heart." Darius's corpse presided over a shoreline ritual. Deep-sea tube worms coiled around his limbs like puppet strings. The hive chanted as the ocean beneath him thinned into a liquid event horizon, revealing the groom's galactic prison, a void teeming with brides from dead stars. Lee fired harpoons wrapped with pearl-charged uranium, but Darius's coral armor deflected them. Valeria's consciousness hissed, "Use the serum. Be the bait." Lee injected himself with the last primordial stem serum, triggering catastrophic mutation. His ribs exploded outward into chitinous wings, his scream echoing as a sperm whale's dirge. The hive mind faltered, drawn to his biomorphic glow. As they converged, Lee plunged into the event horizon, his wings shredding into solar winds. The groom stirred, his shadow eclipsing galaxies. Inside the cosmic abyss, Lee found Valeria's consciousness, a nebula of regret shaped like her human form. They communed via stellar static, decoding the groom's origin, a parasitic dimension that marries civilizations to consume their energy. Valeria's sacrifice had only delayed him. "You have to unravel the vow," she said, offering Lee a star-forged dagger coalesced from her pearl's core. "Cut his thread. I'll hold him here." Re-emerging, Lee crashed into Darius's ritual site. The hive's chant peaked as the borehole yawned wide, the groom's singularity-ringed finger breaching reality. Lee stabbed Darius's coral heart. It burst into plasma, disrupting the hive's signal. Darius's corpse disintegrated, Valeria's hair dissolving into stardust. The infants shrieked, their carapaces cracking under the sudden silence. Lee leaped into the borehole, dagger blazing. The groom's full form defied sight, a recursive agony of infinite brides endlessly consumed. Lee's mutations destabilized, his flesh unraveling as he stabbed the dagger into the vow's core thread. The groom recoiled, his scream birthing supernovae that illuminated a name etched into the void, Valeria's. On the island, Valeria's throne collapsed. The pearl erupted, its shards embedding in the infants, who began regurgitating liquid starlight. The hive mind shattered. Infants cannibalized each other, rebuilding into a monolithic lighthouse of flesh and gemstone. Its beam pierced the borehole just as Lee's dagger struck true. The groom's vow unraveled. Brides disincorporated into free-verse poetry, their sorrows scattering as cosmic rays. Valeria's nebula form wrapped around the groom, her voice a supernova dirge. "You're not a husband. You're a eulogy." The abyss imploded, severing his tether to all dimensions. Lee awoke on the island, human again but cursed with eternal tide saltwater pooled in his lungs, his heartbeat synchronizing with the moon's pull. The flesh lighthouse stood silent, its beam cold. Inside, he found an obsidian epitaph carved with Valeria and Elena's names. Touching it, he heard waves whispering a final truth. The groom dies, but the sea always hungers. Years later, sailors report a ghostly bride patrolling Pueblo Salabra's restored shallows, her body woven from bioluminescence and grief. Some claim she guides ships away from newfound trenches where infant stars wail in familiar voices. Lee drowns himself monthly, seeking her in the abyss, yet resurfaces gasping a warning and a ward. The lighthouse remains, its light now a lullaby no one dares answer.